The main character was bored to the point of despondency, vaguely aware of what steps should be taken to break this monotony. Grace, talented and caring, stood out not only for her academic success, but also for her athletic agility, mental acuity, gentleness, and understanding. After graduating from university, he faced the inevitable prospect of working from 900 to 500, leading a life that he was destined to live until the very end. Grace brought milk and bread into the room, bringing them to the guy, then invited him to share lunch in pleasant company. Jackson apologized, explaining that he had a lot to do and was unable to join her for company. Rejection is felt, especially for the one she likes. In order to change the situation, he needs to try and offer her a better option. She asked if he was acting this way because she was pestering the younger one. He was such a talented poet that she was afraid that his attention to the younger would be attracted to another, and therefore she could not help but confess her feelings to him. In the past, he got along fine with the eldest, but after confessing a week ago, something went wrong. The main character was asked to look out the window, because a pleasant surprise was waiting for him there. As it turned out, a girl was sitting in the window, lighting candles. As it turned out, she expressed her proposal to be together using candles. He only met his eldest a few weeks ago, but she had already done something so special for him. The stranger immediately turned to Grace, and she did not mind the fact that those around her spoke very indecently about her. She was the most talented and beautiful girl at the university, and she simply could not understand how the main character could reject her in the first place. As it turned out, the girl simply didn't think about it. Her friend noticed how Jackson and the girls in his year often headed to the library together. Then, having uttered these words, she looked thoughtfully at Grace. She claimed that all their actions were aimed at the benefit of the younger one, and at the same time sincerely admitted her feelings. She cried out loudly and invited Jackson to be together, showing determination in her feelings. His brothers would never have thought that the eldest might like him, marveling at the unexpected prospect of his feelings. It is unclear why Jackson suddenly decided to hide under the covers at that moment. He asked them not to disturb him, because he wanted to sleep. He explained his behavior by saying that he had no answer for her, and therefore no answer to her confession. They tried to explain to him that he was very lucky and should not do this. He knows that his eldest feels very awkward there, but he is not suitable for the eldest. The eldest Michael is the one who is most suitable for her. They had recently crossed paths in the library, and their meeting was very recent, reminiscent of recent moments in their communication. Michael assured that the younger one did not need to be nervous. Jackson began to explain that he and Grace had only recently met. He already knew all these details, he just wanted to convey to him that he was the girl's future husband. While still very young, they entered into marriage by decision of the elders, but the girl continues to reject him, while he is not going to give up. Jackson realized that this was only possible if the eldest loved him. Michael persistently tried to explain that the girl simply could not cope with the business that her father had handed over to her. He tried to explain to Jackson that if the girl was just an ordinary beauty, she could choose anyone for herself, but in her case she had to be responsible for the future of the enterprise. With one careless move, she can cause inevitable damage to herself, becoming on the verge of destruction. Or perhaps her careless husband-turned-loser will simply drown her in his own worries. After these words were spoken, Jackson was perplexed. After some time, Jackson finally met with the eldest. Grace decided that she would wait for the moment when the younger one would accept her, realizing that last time she spoke out too early. She said that if he had something to do, he could go. In addition to this, she clarified that tomorrow she would be happy to buy him milk, showing concern for his comfort. After this conversation, his mood sharply shook, shrouded in a shadow of uncertainty. Plus, when he was heading somewhere, he accidentally ran right into Michael. With an expression of condemnation in his eyes, he looked closely at the guy, reading something unpleasant and incomprehensible in his actions. At first the main character himself did not realize who he was facing. Jackson thought it was a pretty cool coincidence that he ended up here. Michael suggested that his friends dragged Jackson away from him. It seems that what he said to him last time did not go to heart for him. He explained that he never dared to think about the eldest, and nothing exists between them. Michael rejected the possibility of believing his words and simply, with a mixture of frustration and anger, struck, expressing his reaction physically. The blow was really strong, and Jackson could not stay on his feet, swaying from the force of the impact. Michael is convinced that only a fool would believe that nothing happened between them. Jackson tried his best to explain that he had misunderstood, but his words were lost in a mixture of pain and misunderstanding. He rushed towards him, uttering words that Grace was not the kind of girl who could be touched so easily, condemning him for his action. Then again, with incredible force, he struck him. With bad luck for Jackson, his body began to rush downwards, flying through the air before colliding with the ground. Of course, the main character found himself in complete confusion. not knowing what to do at this moment. When he landed on the ground, accompanied by a mysterious explosion, strange flashes of light and unclear sounds began around him, leaving the protagonist in complete amazement and fear. A split second later, when he came to his senses, he found that his clothes had completely changed. He was amazed, because having fallen from such a height, he turned out to be in perfect order, without visible injuries. Near him, he noticed a mushroom commonly used in Chinese medicine. In addition, behind him there was something absolutely mysterious and inexplicable, looking into another dimension. He couldn't understand why there were so many rare materials around, giving him the feeling that he was in some amazing place with unusual resources. Jackson felt like he was in heaven, surrounded by rays of sunshine and waves of bliss. A mother and daughter passing nearby did not understand why he reacted with such delight to the poisonous mushrooms he discovered. Mom carefully explained to her daughter that every year there are scientists who fail their exams, and sometimes this even leads to loss of sanity. He had studied with Chinese medicine practitioners for several years, and it seemed impossible that he would make a mistake. Moreover, it was difficult for him to understand why the mother and child passing by were dressed in ancient clothes. Then some kind of guess or realization began to dawn on him. Realizing that he had stepped into another world, he wondered if he had now acquired supernatural powers, despite the fact that his body remained the same. In the midst of this moment, a horse rushed behind him, and besides, on top of all this, there was a girl resting on her back. He couldn't believe that he had just ended up here, and already the horse was in his way. At that same moment, the horse and girl simply went limp on the ground. He had the feeling that she was faking it, trying to get all the money out of him. It turned out that the arrow had somehow hit the girl, and he began to think about how she could have ended up in such a troubling situation. Unfortunately, the arrow was perfectly aimed at her chest. Fortunately, the wound was not too deep, but there could be a poisonous warning hidden in the arrowhead. The main character realized that he needed to immediately remove the arrow. He couldn't foresee what would happen after he did this. At that moment, a mysterious yellow glow flashed around him, the personification of unknown forces. Of course, he immediately took off running, because he could not comprehend what exactly was happening around him. He resolutely ignored this entire unclear situation, believing that caring for the healing of the girl's wound was much more important. After some time, the girl felt herself returning to reality. Opening her eyes to the world around her, he continued to care for her wound, noticing with relief how her condition was improving with every second. Jackson felt relieved when she finally opened her eyes. After she opened her eyes, her gaze immediately went to Jackson, her savior. The main character provided her with hot water so she could get a little drunk. But when the main character handed her hot water, the girl's expression changed sharply, and a fire of curiosity and gratitude flared up in her. He explained that she was injured, and the best thing for her now was not to get up, but to continue lying down. Jackson introduced himself and politely asked her name, trying to establish a more personal and warm communication. He confidently believed that their meeting in such a wilderness was fate. The girl, apparently, did not appreciate such a joke and began to draw her sword. After this decisive gesture, she without hesitation rushed to attack Jackson, ready to fight any challenge that fate brought her. He could not understand what provoked the girl's behavior. She supposed he must have a death wish if he decided to talk to her again. He felt that her behavior was too ungrateful, considering that he had just saved her life. Jackson tried his best to resolve this conflict in any way possible. She asked if he tied her. In other words, Jackson could be called her benefactor. She invited him to negotiate his terms, and then assured him that her family would thank him for any help he provided. He asked if she could help him become emperor so that together they could call upon the world. Her face showed confusion and disappointment when she didn't see the seriousness in his words. She brushed off the idea of becoming an emperor, reminding him of real problems that needed to be solved instead of jokes about power. She explained that some of his jokes could end up beheading him, and advised him to pay attention to his sense of proportion. Jackson said that he was not local, had just arrived, and did not fully understand their local customs and rules. After he learned that he was in the state of Dian, it began to dawn on him that local norms might be completely different from what he was used to seeing and understanding. Now, perhaps, he was not on his own land, and looking at his surroundings, somewhere near this girl, it began to seem to him as if he had found himself in another world. Having decided to start by talking with this mysterious girl, he hoped to get some information about your new environment. All this time the girl introduced herself under the name Alice. Having learned that she was a marquise, he could not imagine how this was possible. Of course, Alice flared up with anger when he asked if she could protect her homeland herself. The emperor's family occupies a high position in the hierarchy of the three highest dignitaries of the empire, and most of Jackson's demands can be satisfied by her family. If this girl's entourage is so influential, then he is not obliged to show him politeness, because he has the right to do whatever he wants. Alice couldn't figure out where her chest armor was. He explained that when he found her, she was wounded by an arrow, and so it was natural to remove her chest armor. He explained his decision by saying that she had lost consciousness and was in critical condition. As the girl began to untie herself, he noticed that she might hurt herself, since he had just helped her bandage her wounds. It turned out that the girl was closely monitoring the healing process of her wounds, showing an amazing ability to heal itself, and her body was already beginning to recover from the injuries received. He asked if she could still ride a horse with such a severe wound, and it turned out that she was now recovering quickly, showing amazing resilience and strength. But she flushed with anger when she realized that he had touched her breast. Jackson, sensing the girl's rage, began to tune into survival and did not hesitate, immediately trying to escape. He was quick to explain that his touching her breasts was a medical procedure to speed up the healing process. Alice said that she served in the army for 8 years and long ago stopped paying attention to gender differences. She would never kill someone for such a misunderstanding. She can easily distinguish a sword, whether due to a specific reason or in an ordinary situation, just like that, and even does it 3 times. The first time was due to the fact that he said something rude immediately upon meeting, the second, because of his arrogant behavior. The third time happened when he touched her birthmark. The phoenix birthmark on the chest of the girls in the family disappears if a man touches it. Jackson was occupied with the question of what this magical birthmark was and how it exerted its effect. The birthmark with the phoenix sign on the chest of the girls from the Huan family had its own secret. Its location was hidden, and touching it by strangers was unacceptable. If this rule was broken, the girl had to marry the one who touched its symbol. Of course, Jackson could not contain his emotions when he learned that she would have to get married. The birthmark disappeared only if a stranger touched it. In addition, there were no strict rules in the family, and birthmarks were kept under control. Fortunately, there is no need to marry her, although she looks really beautiful, but the slightly moving birthmark on her chest immediately makes her draw her sword. Jackson explained that he felt unworthy of a girl like her. If he doesn't want it, then he has his own decision. Of course, her family never imposed conditions on their daughter in this matter. The main character noted that she, the interlocutor, doesn't look bad either. He felt a stream of unexpected events sweep over him, causing slight stupefaction and misunderstanding in the face of a new and unusual situation. So his kindness will have to be repaid in the next life. The law had just saved her life. He had not yet returned to where she owed him. It is because of this kindness that she gives him a chance to choose. If it had been anyone else, she would have killed him instantly. If anything, in the face of this situation, he made an important decision for himself. He finally decided to agree to the proposal to marry her. They have not yet entered into marriage, so he should not call her wife, but should call her by her name. Previously, the possibility of marrying a heavenly man actually existed in a girl's family. Jackson felt slightly perplexed and began to ask himself questions regarding this entire unusual situation that was developing around him. In ancient times, no one with any ability would become a son-in-law accepted into a wife's house, for this was considered a disgrace for men. He dared to ask what the consequences might be if he refused the role of son-in-law, not wanting to accept this marriage proposal. Alice, looking at him with resentment, demonstrated that she could calmly decide to kill him for refusing to accept the offer to become her son-in-law. She shifted her gaze, and Jackson realized that the girl was capable of killing him for this refusal. From that moment on, he entered the Huayan family as a recognized and welcomed man. At this time, Alice admired the beauty of the flowers surrounding them. Besides the fact that Alice was constantly drawing her sword, she turned out to be quite cute. Just at that moment, Jackson noticed someone approaching them from behind. They were warriors on horseback, and Jackson realized that they might be facing a new, unpredictable danger. An unknown guy approached the girl with a question, disturbing her momentary peace from the flowers and thereby creating a new element of surprise. Everyone present expressed joy and delight when they saw Alice. She said that the general should not be too polite. The man immediately began to apologize to her for the fact that their army attacked. Alice told them to express their gratitude to her fiancé for saving her this time. Everyone present was shocked when the word groom was spoken, a sudden revelation that made them wonder about unexpected variables in the future. Her words of resourcefulness became fact when she brought clarity by introducing Jackson. The main characters greeted the guests with friendliness and warmth, opening their hearts to new relationships. With their voices united in a single chorus, all the warriors expressed their gratitude for saving her life, creating a moment of unity and deep gratitude. On the way back, the general, unable to withstand curiosity, decided to find out how he managed to win Alice's heart. The general asked not to touch on the topic of his character, claiming that even on horseback he felt clumsy. When Jackson finally decided to demonstrate his skills, nothing good came of it, and he simply fell off his horse unsuccessfully. This moment seemed extremely strange to the man, because he did not seem all that strong, and he could not understand why Alice could be attracted to him. His family's martial arts are among the top 3 in the world. Skill, tenacity and technique create a unique style of their art. The mysterious conversation about the art of family was confusing, and he could not figure out which top 3 they were talking about. He was in disbelief at the strength that Alice displayed and could not believe that she was so powerful. The general presented his sword, looked carefully at his interlocutor and, asking whether he, with such courage, did not realize that he was being underestimated. The man was ready for all possible scenarios at that moment, even for the extreme step, the final resolution of the situation here and now. At that moment, Alice decisively came to Jackson's defense, declaring that he would withstand 3 blows from her the first time they met. The general immediately began to apologize, noting that his son-in-law was simply an amazing person. Jackson couldn't understand why Alice agreed with his words. Perhaps she sincerely wanted him to become her husband. At this very time they almost arrived in the village, where everyone was frantically discussing the new groom. Of course, like everyone else in the village, they could not forgive themselves how Alice could choose such a simpleton. The girl simply could not understand why Jackson was so concerned about the opinions of others. The Eastern Palace greeted them with its majestic architecture, muted colors of sunset, and finally they entered its exquisite halls, full of mysterious splendor. Jackson was so well guarded that none of their men had yet been able to meet the Marquis's future husband. As it turned out, it was a prince named Oscar. The main character, raising his eyebrows in slight misunderstanding, looked around Alice's house, in which there was something mysterious and unknown. The girl announced that she had important matters to attend to in the near future, and asked Jason to take her brother to rest during these days. When Jackson asked the general if she was always so busy, he was surprised, thinking that he already knew the answer to his question. The attack on the Marquis was probably initiated by his own men. After the Marquis entered the palace to meet the saint, she had to go to the military camp to investigate the incident. Jason simply asked the guy to wait until she told him about these things herself. The general introduced Alice's future husband, emphasizing that in the future they would all have to obey his orders. Seeing many arrows with bows, he realized that this was the world of evil capitalism, and after many days, he was finally able to enjoy a moment of solitude. Noticing how quickly things had changed since Jason left, he noticed that the servants began to look at him with some displeasure. He hoped that maybe he was just overthinking it and there was no real reason to worry. And at this very time an unfamiliar girl came to him. Besides, she, not slow, began to undress right there. She noted that he must have been tired from the whole day and, being a slave in this place, offered to rub his shoulders. He asked to introduce the girl with dignity, reminding her that they still had to discuss some issues of feudal etiquette. She said that she was surprised that he still retained his integrity, being in such a world full of intrigue and temptation, and expressed her respect for his strength of character. Jackson tried his best to push her away. He insisted that he was a seriously educated man and that he would not dare cheat on his future wife. The girl took a deep breath, as if preparing to say something important, and suddenly, for unknown reasons, she began to scream, beg for help, declaring that someone was going to attack her with the intention of violent assault. Of course, in response to her screams, the servants immediately ran up to them. Of course, they immediately began to condemn Jackson for his action. Judging by what happened, he was the culprit of an irreparable mistake. The man ordered him to be locked in a wooden shed and told them to wait for Alice, let her decide what to do with him. Of course, the main character was completely at a loss to understand what was happening, unable to comprehend what was happening here at all. Oddly enough, within a few minutes he was already in the barn. Now the main character was faced with the task of dealing with this entire incomprehensible situation. Jackson could not comprehend that he had really been framed in this incomprehensible story. He was already beginning to think that he would be left locked here forever. In addition to all this, he enjoyed the sight of the beautiful iron railings. He immediately noticed that there were guards standing outside, and realized that this would clearly not be easy. If he had foreseen that everything would turn out this way, then, of course, he would not have become a son-in-law in this family. The main character, weighing everything that had happened, decided that he could use a little rest, and, having banished thoughts of strange circumstances, he went to bed, despite all the mystery of what was happening around him. Immediately after this, vague sounds began to be heard from the cell, and a strange yellow glow began to be emitted around. The guard, who was closely monitoring the barn, turned to his partner and asked if he had heard something. The guards, fully convinced that everything was calm in the barn, did not pay attention to any sounds and continued to monitor the area, unaware that anything unusual was happening inside. It was at this time, on the campus of the university, that a man was listening to music and enthusiastically doing his work, completely unaware of the events taking place around him. A blue beam suddenly appeared behind him, a harbinger of the approaching appearance of someone unusual. The man finally heard something happening behind him and turned around decisively to see what was happening. As he got closer, he recognized Jackson in front of him, whose face expressed some anxiety and uncertainty. In the blink of an eye, both men exchanged surprised glances, trying to understand what brought them together at this unexpected moment at the university. He decided that this was just a student who decided to take advantage of the moment and sleep here during classes. He realized that this state of affairs could not continue, and proceeded to Jackson, persistently trying to wake him up and bring him back to reality. But once again emphasizing that this was not a place to sleep, he insistently told Jackson to get up as quickly as possible. When Jackson finally came to his senses completely, he was overcome with a slightly overwhelming feeling, suddenly realizing that he was in a university building and not in a barn, as he had assumed. The main character immediately recognized the man who usually does the cleaning and asked if he had also crossed the boundaries of the worlds. The man only noted that in their day young people studied poorly and could not understand what they were thinking about all day long. Jackson decided that everything that had happened was just a dream, incomprehensible and confusing, and tried to recognize the situation as a fragment of his unconscious world. The main character tried to find out how much time he spent in his sleep, but it turned out that the man had just discovered him here. As it turned out later, Jackson had something in his pocket. When he returned back and began to clean up, he was immediately asked if Jackson's return had brought their relationship to a new level, since he returned at night. Jackson explained that his thoughts were currently in disarray and he decided to get some sleep to collect himself and analyze everything that had happened before making any final decisions. Jackson stated that despite his ability to express himself, he still plans to go to bed under any circumstances. The brothers decided that Jackson was really tired, and they decided that he had better get a good night's sleep. Of course, he couldn't sleep and wondered how real this whole thing with the transition to another world could be. If it was real, then what is even more amazing is that he may have experienced the cycles of life and death several times. And this root, which ended up in his pocket, seemed to be the best proof of everything that was happening. In addition, he was interested in what the eldest was doing at the moment. He had experienced the transition between life and death, and now it seemed to him that he no longer had anything to fear in the feelings of his elder. This experience gave him special confidence that he could approach difficult issues in his relationship more openly and calmly. He dialed her number and introduced himself so that she would know who was calling. Grace immediately began talking about her grandfather, describing him with love and warmth, sharing memories of his fascinating stories and wise advice. Jackson realized that the situation was not the best and began to calm Grace down, begging her to explain what was happening. Grace shared that her grandfather is in poor health and was admitted to the intensive care unit yesterday after suffering a seizure. Jackson immediately asked what hospital her grandfather was in and strongly suggested that he come over to keep Grace company during this difficult moment. She expressed her gratitude by saying that Jackson is very kind and that's what she likes about him. However, she advised him to forget about them as she knows well how sensitive her brother is. Jackson admitted that it would be too difficult for him to meet with her family at such a difficult time. Jackson knew that even Grace knew he didn't have the courage to face her family. Just at this time, Grace's mother was looking for the very route that Jackson found, and then the guy had an idea that could change the course of things. The girl decided that she would look after her grandfather and wait for her brother to become brave. He decisively inquired whether they were looking for the freshly harvested root, making it clear that he had information about the place where it could be found. He reported that he had freshly harvested root, which was definitely collected no more than a week ago. Grace immediately told her mother that her little brother had some freshly picked root on hand. She immediately began to wonder where the guy came from and what family he was from. He always knew that his sister's family would react to him this way. The girl began to explain to her mother that she did not know him personally, but if he claims that he did it, then he did it. She added that despite possible family differences, they have a common desire to create a future together and take care of their offspring from their younger brother. Mom just couldn't understand how a rich girl dared to say such things. She asked Jackson to wait a little before school because she was going to ask her driver to pick him up. The mother will never allow strangers who are not her relatives to come to the hospital. Although the girl's family does not want to see him, her grandfather's life is important to her, and he should go to the hospital. He felt relieved when he saw that the car arrived on time, giving him the opportunity to support Grace in this difficult moment. Of course, everyone present, including the guy, was shocked by such a luxurious car. The driver added that Grace often talked about Jackson and his unusual adventures, creating a unique image in her daily life. Not only he, but all the house servants have seen his photographs. After all, Grace is worried that he might come to their home and all her loved ones will not know him. He sees that his sister went to great lengths for him, and this makes him feel especially grateful and responsible to her. But, on the other hand, he himself also sacrificed a lot in this situation. Jackson was shocked, because he knew that the Grace family was rich, but he didn't expect that much. The girl, having met Jackson, showed cordiality and offered help. She was polite and hospitable, trying to create comfort for him at that moment. When he tried to give her the route, she advised him not to do it here. She asked him to follow her, because she wanted everyone to know that her younger brother saved her grandfather. She never doubted the younger one's words. If the route turned out to be artificial, then the younger one was probably just mistaken. After these words, Jackson simply hugged her tightly, feeling relieved and grateful for her understanding. They continued to stand there, in an embrace. The moment was important and required special attention. At that moment Jackson felt the support and understanding that was so needed. He said that he always wanted to be there for her, and that as long as she loved him, he would be willing to do anything for her. Of course, she had not expected him to take such an initiative, and her heart was filled with gratitude for his openness and willingness to be there. She suggested that perhaps he had experienced something yesterday that she did not know about, and this was the reason for his unexpected and sincere initiative. Jackson became nervous, because he thought that she knew that he had crossed over to another world. It seems that this was true, otherwise my brother would not have grown up so quickly. Of course, Jackson could not give himself away and began to say that nothing had happened, trying to maintain normal communication and avoid additional questions. The mother, carefully examining her children, expressed her joy at meeting and asked how their day was. Jackson, embarrassed, smiled and replied that everything was fine, trying to give a normal tone to the conversation. She asked that her daughter be released immediately, seeing that something unusual was happening and feeling the tension in the air. Both the guy and the girl were slightly perplexed, not understanding why the mother was so insistent on letting her daughter go. Grace said that Jackson is her boyfriend, and as soon as she graduates from university, she plans to live with him. The mother said that she has no right to say whether he is her boyfriend or not. He asked his aunt to look at the route first, explaining that it had recently been collected and could serve as evidence of the events that had occurred. The mother decided that she would show this route to the doctor to demonstrate to her daughter how a person she values could deceive her. The doctor was a veteran of Chinese medicine, and no low-quality Chinese medicine could escape his careful gaze. If she finds out that he is cheating them into fake medicine, he may not even go near her daughter in the future. The healing route finally reached the doctor, bringing with it a hint of worry and hope for healing. The man studied it carefully, trying to make sure of its reliability and quality. Grace immediately hugged him, hearing that all the doctor's experience over the years of practice had not given him the opportunity to meet such a beautiful route. The woman said that the fact that he saved her father did not mean anything. The woman claimed that his help was due only to her appearance and the condition of her family. She stated that he himself is not capable of anything, but directs all his efforts to get through, sucking up to women throughout his life. Jackson has already noticed that he is not from a prosperous family and considers himself not worthy enough for her. Well, he has his merits, and she will not be able to trample on them. The main character said that he had his own business to do and invited the girl to look after her grandfather. And then, just as they were engrossed in their conversations, news arrived that grandfather had come to his senses and woke up, suddenly bringing a sense of relief and hope for the best into the atmosphere. Of course, the whole family was delighted with such good news. As he left the place, Jackson wondered if anything had changed as a result of his visit. Her mother, who had always expressed her dislike for their relationship, had not wavered in her opinion of him, and Jackson wondered if he had managed to bring about any change in her views. At that moment, Michael was holding that very root in his hands and thinking that it was thanks to this that he could attract Grace's attention. To Jackson's surprise, he ran into Michael again, just like before. Irritated and perplexed, the guy was incredibly thinking about how one could be so blind as to encounter it a second time, eliminating the possibility of his own failure. When Jackson appeared in front of him again, slight bewilderment flashed through his inner world. The puzzles in his mind did not converge into the expected image. He absolutely could not understand how he was still standing, and the absurd idea that he might already be dead flashed through his thoughts. Jackson confirmed his assumptions that he died, but at the same time added that he came back. Without thinking for a long time, the main character instantly responded to Michael with a blow, exactly the same as the one he had hit him with. He announced that he had returned only to send a clear message to Michael that his sister did not deserve the hypocritical deceiver that he was. Of course, the guy still couldn't believe it, because he fell from the top floor, and, moreover, it was assumed that they got rid of his body. Jackson once again confirmed that he is a ghost brought back to life, and if this guy wants to live, then he better not mess with his sister, and also stay away from him personally. At that moment, someone behind him shouted to stop moving, and his heart slowed down under the unexpected call. The woman could not understand how he dared to beat someone right on the territory of her hospital. Her eyes expressed bewilderment and indignation. She was naive, falling for the deception of a man with such a cruel and hypocritical character as he was. Now, in a green clearing, 3 people had gathered, and in their glances one could read a mixture of bewilderment, disappointment and excitement, the beginning of an unexpected story. Michael immediately began to explain that Jackson was just a ghost, trying to restore the meaning of what was happening. She wondered if Michael had come here with the task of delivering the root, and there was a mixture of surprise and suspicion in her gaze as she tried to decipher the hidden meaning of this unusual meeting. He heard that an auction house in Western Europe was selling freshly harvested root, so he asked his butler to purchase it. The woman offered him 500,000 for the root, and the remaining 500,000 to stay away from her daughter. In addition to the offer of money, she emphasized that this root was a real treasure with special properties, its value exceeded simply material parameters. In conclusion, she ordered him to take the money and disappear, expressing her irritation and desire for him to go to hell. Now that he took the money, of course, the girl's mother will say that he was only with her for the money, creating a shadow of suspicion around their relationship. And just as he was walking down the street, he noticed a donation box in front of him. Despite his recent difficulties, he resolutely stated that he was donating $1 million in an attempt to restore his reputation in the eyes of passers-by and leave his dubious actions in the past. They even asked him again, asking if he was sure about the $1 million donation, doubting the sincerity of his decision. This guy was hoping Jackson could say his name because they needed him in the ad. Because of this, people might start looking for him, and he was wondering whether he should leave a name that does not exist in this world in order to avoid possible persecution. For some unknown reason, he decided to take the name Alice, creating a mysterious air of mystery around his identity. When he returned home, his brothers bombarded him with questions, eager to know every detail of what had happened. They were hungry for news and events. She assured that there was no need to worry, because her grandfather was getting better, and besides, he had stopped communicating with her. Of course, both brothers were completely shocked by what they heard, and their faces showed bewilderment and dissatisfaction, trying to comprehend what was happening. The first thing that came to their mind was to simply get drunk in connection with this event. They tried to find a way out of the stunning situation in a glass. One of the brothers decided to go downstairs and buy some food to prepare a snack for the drinks. A few seconds later, oddly enough, all 3 were drunk, and in their cheerful conversations there were laughter and joyful episodes. Alcohol became the magic key to temporary oblivion. And so, just when the main character was sleeping, he began to be transported to another world, where reality intertwined with surreality, and dreams became the gateway to unknown adventures. When he woke up, finding himself in another world, he had to instantly adapt to the new environment and understand what had happened. Moreover, as it turned out, it was at that moment that Alice had already returned, creating an additional element of surprise in this mysterious world. He realized that if Alice found out what he had done, then inevitable death awaited him, and fear gripped him like a shadow of inevitability. He could not understand only one thing: why he was chained, and this riddle became a point of ignorance in his new reality. Unfortunately for Jackson, it was at this moment that his future wife appeared, creating further tension in the air and raising questions about the past and present. He was sure that this was the end for him, because this cruel woman had almost taken his life because of family traditions, and he felt fear taking over his soul. He began to explain that it was a misunderstanding and asked her if she would believe it if he said that it was the maid who tried to kill him. He begged her with all his might for mercy, trying to convey his powerlessness and the sincerity of his words. He even began to cry, begging her not to be so impulsive and to think before making radical decisions. But nothing could stop Alice, and she drew her sword, which seemed strange and unexpected. After which she threw her blow towards Jackson, absorbing his fear and hopelessness of the moment. He found himself, as it were, chained to the spot, struck by shock after this whole situation, and became the stone underside of his soul. He could not understand at all what had happened, surprised that it seemed that he was not even hurt, despite the noticeable blow. As you might guess, the Marquise was aiming directly at the chains on his legs, trying to deprive him of his freedom in the face of her indignation. Alice asked the man if this was his first time running a mansion. Her voice sounded insistent. She already knew the answer. She noted that even if more than 30 years have passed, he must understand that even a lord can make a mistake and still remain a lord. He explained that he had always valued the Marquise's reputation, and he was worried that her husband might influence her favor in society. Alice said that Jackson did not need to say anything, she believed him, and that the maid who allegedly seduced him would be expelled from the palace immediately. Now that he has entered the house, the Marquis will be in their care. Let Alice give him the keys to the inner treasury. After a few seconds, the man finally took out the key to the treasury, revealing the secrets and hiding places that were hidden inside. Alice said that Jackson is the most important person here, leaving out Grandpa and herself, emphasizing his role in their new home dynamic. Alice added that if he is not of imperial blood, and someone dares to offend him, then she will definitely come to the rescue. Now, it is no wonder why girls love romantic acts, as this story brings out the protective and devoted side of a man. He could not understand who could stand such a beautiful and powerful woman as the Marchioness, wondering about the possibility of finding a suitable partner for her. She said that he was still as funny as he was, emphasizing that time had not changed his sense of humor and lightness of soul. Since they are not strangers, they cannot call each other by name, which creates a special intimacy in their relationship. Jackson could not believe that all this was happening to him. The scenario of a funny comedy became a reality. She informed him that they had no plans to return to his room, leaving him confused in his own thoughts. As Alyssa began to change clothes, Jackson asked if he needed to go out, sensing the delicateness of the moment. She explained that she and he were married and she was in the military, so she didn't need to act like a lady, getting used to freestyle. Alice asked him to tell him what happened the previous night, showing interest in the events and waiting for clarification. She only knew the general picture, but never heard the details told to her, expressing her curiosity and anticipation of his story. She angrily asked if he had been harassing her, expressing displeasure and uncertainty about his behavior. He said that, of course, no, and especially since he was still a virgin, emphasizing his innocence and non-involvement in unwanted intimate situations. He decided not to elaborate, simply saying that in general he did not molest her, keeping the mystery surrounding what happened. He couldn't understand how she could trust him when she didn't know what happened, expressing his doubts about her ability to trust him. Naturally, he is her husband, and she trusts him. If he liked the maid, he asked if he needed a concubine, playing with humor and mockery. He asked if he could have a concubine, expressing his wishes and desire for openness in the relationship. He expressed his position, believing that concubines represent an unholy feudal society that leads people to degradation. The world considers her a cruel woman and believes that she is indifferent to her reputation as a marquise, creating an image of a mysterious and unpredictable person around her. She once again asked if he wanted a concubine and if he was willing to exchange her for her, raising the question of possible infidelity in their relationship. Alice is a righteous and reasonable woman, comparison with whom is only possible for a man who spent his whole life with her, emphasizing her outstanding qualities. He stated that as long as he was her husband, he had no intention of having a concubine, emphasizing his fidelity and devotion in marriage. He still decided to tell what really happened, trying to clarify the situation and share the truth with Alice. Alice flushed with anger. She could not understand how they dared to enter the Marquis's house, expressing their rage and dissatisfaction with what had happened. She told him not to worry about it, promising that she would take care of everything, expressing her willingness to take charge of the situation. Just at this moment, Alice was informed that there was a box with magical objects in the living room, and the girl did not know how to handle them, adding to the mystery of what was happening. For some reason, Jackson immediately thought about the beer he had brought, remembering his previous action and the possible consequences. Alyssa couldn't understand what Jackson was talking about, feeling misunderstood and waiting for clarification. The main character wondered why he crossed over to another world again. It seems that every time he jumps worlds, he takes something with him in his hands, raising the question of the nature of these movements. If he's right, then he can move between two worlds. If two worlds intersect and he can still transport things, this could mean a lot, opening up new possibilities and secrets. If he can move the basket of roots, he can buy 1 million cans of beer, and there are also exotic treasures of the Marquis that can be sold for a fortune, opening up the possibility of incredible adventures and riches. Then all the barriers between him and his sister will be broken, anticipating the possible resolution of the difficult relationship and providing new perspectives. Now, having the opportunity to earn a fortune was amazing, opening up new prospects and new opportunities for him. Jackson called the mansion manager over to him, preparing to discuss his new plans and ideas for using the Marquis's magical items and treasures. He asked the man to take him to the Marquis's warehouse, where he was going to look at magical items and treasures in preparation for new adventures. He announced that he would take care of the Marquis's treasures and resources, expressing his willingness to effectively manage and utilize the wealth available in the mansion. The treasures of the Marquis's centuries-old home are not too much, if not much richer than the country, emphasizing the enormous size and status of this house. He decided to take a dragon's eye pearl and a jade finger or something like that, thinking it wasn't too much, hoping to use them in his new plans. The man asked him to look at the objects, perhaps to give the necessary explanations or talk about their origin and properties. When there was nothing in the treasury, Jackson believed that the man had decided to empty the vault and was trying to frame him, possibly revealing potential intrigues and intriguing events. The man asked the Marquis to calm down, perhaps trying to prevent a conflict and clarify the situation. Despite this, the Emperor still suspects the Marquis, and other families pursue him at every turn, creating additional complications and challenges in his attempts to succeed. It turned out that Alice took on a lot, expanding her responsibilities and actively participating in the management of the centuries-old house of the Marquise. He has asked the manager to provide him with records of the house and shops as he wants to study them in an effort to gain a better understanding of the current condition and management of the centuries-old house. He realized that he was not destined to even dream of wealth, faced with reality and, perhaps, discovering some difficulties in his plans. The man said that the records were still being compiled, so he should not rush, emphasizing the need to wait for the process to complete and receive up-to-date information. He probably doesn't know anything about the route and asked him to tell him where there are many herbs here, showing interest in finding the right resources for his future plans. Outside the capital were most of the herbs Jackson needed, revealing a wealth of natural resources beyond the city's borders. He couldn't believe that there was dragon grass here, feeling surprise and perhaps joy at the unexpected discovery of a valuable resource. The woman told the guy to just get used to Jackson, emphasizing the need to adapt to a new and possibly unusual environment or circumstances. The main character decided that after collecting the necessary resources, he could return home, planning to complete his mission and return to his usual concerns. He asked the manager to then take all the grass to the bedroom, giving instructions to a specific place where he wanted to place the collected resources. He will have to return with only what he has on hand, since he will not be able to take it with him unless he puts it in his bedroom, demonstrating limitations in carrying resources. He is engaged to the Marchioness and has no place of his own, so if he lives in the Marchioness's house, he will have to sleep with her, revealing new aspects of his circumstances and causing possible changes in his life. But Jackson said it was inappropriate to sleep together before marriage, emphasizing his moral beliefs and desire to maintain tradition in his relationship with his future spouse. In particular, nobles have a set rule in marriage, but the Marchioness has been on the battlefield for so long that she does not take people's rules seriously, emphasizing her unfamiliarity with everyday situations and norms of behavior. After so many years of loneliness, he is going to share his bed with a beauty and a woman today. Of course, it would be a lie to say that he was not looking forward to it, highlighting his long-awaited hopes for intimacy and happiness in marriage. But it was simply too unexpected for him, expressing his surprise and possible unforeseen twists and turns in the new chapter of his life. Just at that moment he was simply hit with a hoof, suddenly introducing an element of danger and drama into the story. Alice asked if he would like to share a room with her, raising the question of intimacy and living together, causing additional tension and interest in their relationship. She assumed it was because of the virginity mentioned that morning, emphasizing her powers of observation and desire to understand her future husband's motives and feelings. Of course, he became slightly embarrassed after these words, adding an element of embarrassment and uncertainty to his reaction to Alice's proposal. He explained that he was afraid of being rude to her. After all, he is a man, revealing his inner anxieties and feelings in this new situation for him. As for the grass, if he wants to sleep next to her, don't be shy, she doesn't care. She sleeps in the open all year round, showing openness to his desires and habits. Of course, this was good news for Jackson, bringing him relief and joy at this moment. He felt a strange uneasiness, but did not understand where it came from. Some mysterious memory slowly awakened in his soul, creating a tangle of feelings and thoughts. Jackson, being a man, surprisingly resembled the maid whom the Marquise took care of, combining masculinity and tenderness. And just at that moment, Alice came out of the door towards him, adding a fresh wind of change to the situation with her appearance. Her form was beautiful, a work of art, personifying the grace and feminine beauty contained in every curve of her figure, captivating the eye with its unique elegance. He couldn't understand how anyone could resist such an attraction, wondering if he was going to take the plunge to end his virginity in this moment of mixed feelings and uncertainty. He suggested that she just talk to her first, wanting to discern the secret shades of her thoughts before plunging into the uncharted waters of passion and interweaving of feelings. When he saw her in front of him, he really just blushed. Shy rose petals bloomed on his cheeks under the influence of unexpected beauty. To be honest, Jackson felt a little strange. At this time, a battle between an angel and a demon was unfolding in his head. Two opposing principles collided and fought for his mind. The guy faced a very difficult choice. He decided he wasn't ready yet because it was too sudden. Alice said that tomorrow morning she was leaving for a northern military town, leaving behind her an air of incredible anticipation and mystery. Behind her decision lay the secrets of distant travels. Jackson finally relaxed, because he had decided that he would sleep. The shadow of uncertainty dissolved into the peaceful darkness, giving him a peaceful rest. He is a real man and will not do anything bad to his wife, since there is harmony in his heart, and loyalty and sincerity reign in his soul. Just at this moment, the main character began to think about the woman. Her image enveloped his mind in a soft haze of exciting thoughts and mysterious emotions. He simply could not understand how she was able to fall asleep so quickly, settling down on a rough pillow. The secret of her peace remained a mystery to him, permeated with an unknown lightness. When he fell asleep, he just managed to grab the basket of herbs with his hand. The instinct of self-defense did not leave him even in the world of dreams, creating mysterious images in his subconscious. Of course, when the main character woke up, he found himself in a new world, reality and dream intertwined, leaving a trace of mysterious movement in his soul. He tried in every possible way to quickly wake up in order to start acting. An important mission awaited him in this unusual world, and every second was precious. His guess was confirmed, and he was sure that wealth awaited him. The anticipation of adventure added excitement and determination to his heart. His brother came to him and said that they had not seen him since he left in the morning. The uncertainty of his whereabouts disturbed the peace and caused anxiety in the family circle. In addition, he did not even answer calls, and his brother thought that he might have gone crazy. The unknown secret of his disappearance created anxiety and misunderstanding among his loved ones. It turns out that only those things that he holds in his hands can be transferred with him. The rules of this strange world violated the usual laws of space and time. He apologized to his brother and said that he would now tell him where he went after their drinking session, trying to restore the gap in communication and share the long-awaited explanation. The guy thought that perhaps Jackson had gone to the mountains in the middle of the night for the sake of his sister. The mysterious circumstances of his disappearance began to break through the veil of mystery. He was stunned when he saw the bloody route in front of him and thought that perhaps Jackson had robbed the pharmacy, the mysterious tracks leading him to unexpected conclusions about what was happening. He hoped that the protagonist hadn't done anything illegal to achieve all this, concern about the law slowly seeping into his thoughts. He explained that these were freshly picked wild herbs, unprocessed, and you couldn't find them in any pharmacy, trying to explain that his actions were nothing illegal. The guy finally understood where Jackson got them from, even though he was surprised that there were two whole baskets. The mysterious secret of their origin began to clear up. Jackson wanted his brother to sell them for him, simply to get the lowest market price for them. His intention was secretive and did not require unnecessary rhetoric. Well, then he should know where the main character got it from, because they do not sell anything illegal, explaining that their activities are legal and clean. He couldn't yet say where it all came from, but he promised him that everything was legal, in bewilderment, but trying to calm his worries. Of course, the guy was a little nervous at that moment. The uncertainty and mystery of the situation created a slight tension in his inner world. He decided to trust Jackson, especially since these valuable herbs were in great demand. The impact of the possible benefits began to outweigh his doubts. The main character proposed dividing the profits among everyone, trying to create an atmosphere of mutual assistance and justice in their small society. At this moment, the guy called his second brother to discuss everything, trying to bring clarity to the situation through mutual understanding within the family. They were glad to see the third brother, because if he had not been there, a little more, and the fourth would have called the police. The internal connection of the family became a kind of saving link. The guy asked them not to quarrel, but rather to see what Jackson brought them, trying to divert attention from possible disagreements and focus them on something positive. Of course, they also decided that he had simply robbed a Chinese medicine store. The puzzling plot of events led them to the wrong assumptions. The fourth brother said that it was his family's business to sell such things, and asked if he didn't see it, putting an end to the dispute and bringing logic to the conversation. Obviously, freshly picked herbs, such supplies cannot be found in stores. They filled the air with a unique aroma, offering an immersion in the magical world of green fields. The guy couldn't understand where the main character got all this money from out of thin air. They started asking the second brother about herbs because his family sells them. If you can supply the goods consistently, then in less than a year the cost of herbs can rise to tens of millions. But if the source of supply is revealed, everything can turn out to be nothing. The guy said that when you arrive, you will not be a stranger to him, since you saved him from the words of his father, who claimed that he could not cope with his job. With no further news, he decides to head back to the library, so next time they might want to stay away from the dorm party. Jackson asked him to wait because he wanted him to help him monitor the weed trade process. He asked him not to think that he would try to deceive him, and therefore offered him a job in order to strengthen their friendship. Jackson said that he misunderstood him because his proposal did not affect their friendship. Jackson recalled that both brothers were children of wealthy families, and asked if he was just going to watch how he was deceived. They are not thinking too clearly, but they promised him there would be no more deception. They thought he went too far when he mentioned his brothers. Jackson really needed their help, because he was afraid that an outsider was too focused on profit. The guy looked at Jackson very thoughtfully. Jackson could not understand why the guy was asking for only 0.5% of profit per month, because for such services they usually charge at least 20%. One of the guys suggested they go downstairs, eat and celebrate the success of the business that the third brother had brought them. Just then, Jackson received a call from Grace. She was glad that the guy was okay and finally picked up the phone. He confirmed her words, said hello and added that he had a busy day, full of surprises. She found out what her mother did yesterday when Michael found her and told her Jackson was missing. She was scared but relieved to know he was okay. The guy immediately began to find out where she was and offered to meet. She assumed he had gone through something again that she didn't know about since he had expressed a desire to meet her. She wondered when she could marry him so that there would be no more secrets between them. However, he offered to meet and discuss all issues. She decided to come to his place, but it turned out that all his roommates were there too, so she decided to go in and meet them. Jackson was a little surprised when she mentioned roommates. He said everything was fine and was just about to go have lunch. He asked him to wait and said that she would come soon. The roommates immediately began rushing around the room, preparing for the girl's arrival. He asked not to make such a dramatic event out of this whole situation. The first ever talented and beautiful girl from their university, with exquisite physical characteristics, became a real legendary goddess for them. It's difficult to explain to him what kind of pressure they face when there's a girl in front of them, because he communicates with the girl every day, but they don't. They are still exaggerating. It would be better if they paid attention to the guy, because he was very calm. In turn, he combed his hair. Also, expressing a desire to enhance his look, he asked Jackson to borrow his perfume to add a little elegance to his outfit. Jackson was glad that they had finally met and said that he had made reservations at the restaurant downstairs. The brothers immediately started bombarding him with questions about the restaurant. The main character reported that Grace said that she would be happy to sit with him anywhere. They were almost at the entrance, ready to enjoy the evening at the restaurant. Everyone present was very surprised that the girl came to the boys' dormitory. Grace greeted Jackson from afar. One of the guys couldn't understand why he liked some loser. It was the first time he'd met such a girl. At this time, the brothers were discussing a friend that the girl had brought with her. It was great, the girl from the English department who wasn't right for one of the guys. He couldn't understand why he didn't have a chance since Jackson and Grace were compatible. When they finally met, the girl hugged him tightly. As it turned out, thanks to the root that the guy brought, her grandfather's health improved. The friend was very aggressive towards Jackson at that moment. Grace asked not to slander Jackson. The guy himself confirmed her words, saying that he was too weak before. The guy decided to act, and he already had a plan in his head. He asked Jackson to introduce them while he walked confidently forward, ready to meet Grace's friends. The girl said that this was not necessary, because she already knew all of them. The guy's name was Mason, the second was Jacob, and the third was Alexander. As it turned out, Alexander was second in the university rankings. He confirmed her words and added that she was in third place. Of course, the girl became angry at his words, and in the tense atmosphere it became noticeable that some hostile glances were directed in his direction. She promised him that soon he himself would be in third place. Alexander said that at this rate it would take her another year to catch up with him. At this time, Michael was in the club and relaxing. He was informed that guys went on a date with Jackson. Of course, Michael was furious and could not believe these words. Besides, last time he was told that Jackson fell to his death, and this whole story with Grace caused him shock and bewilderment. The man began to come up with various excuses to avoid meeting his boss. Before that, he disgraced himself in the hospital in front of her mother, and this is not the end. One of the guys, looking at the situation, asked his drinking buddies what they should actually do in this situation, leaving all decisions to their discretion. He asked everyone to gather and announced that they were heading to visit the main character. At this point, Jacob told various shameful stories about Jackson. He asked her if she had any free friends so that he could meet them. The girl said that she would send him the contacts of her classmate, and he could run after them. One of the brothers said that Grace was too kind, and if he dared to bully her, they would simply kill him. He sincerely thanked her for showing interest in him, and this gave him confidence and joy. To which the girl replied that she should thank God for meeting him. The brothers, having assessed the situation, asked them to stop being gentle, suggesting they move on to more serious issues. A man pointed his finger at a table with friends and said that one of them had deceived him. The general tension in the room grew, and the eyes of those gathered began to be directed to the table where a new intriguing moment was flaring up. The brothers asked to stop the affection when a man pointed to a table with friends, accusing one of them of deception, causing bewilderment among those gathered. He began to say that the root that he dug up in the mountains, he wanted to sell for 100,000 to treat his wife. Accusing Jackson of pretending to be a customer to steal the root, the man described how he left while buying water and was never able to catch up with him. His wife did not have money to see a doctor, and because of this she died yesterday. Everyone present couldn't believe that Jackson had actually done it. The guy standing next to him, on the contrary, smiled, watching this whole situation. They could not believe that there was such a person at his school. Their surprise only increased, because Jackson, who seemed attractive and inconspicuous to them, suddenly became a figure in an intriguing scandal. Of course, they were all sure that he was a good person and would never dare to do such a thing. Jackson firmly stated that they could talk about him whatever they wanted, but they shouldn't touch his girlfriend, emphasizing this point with a serious look in his eyes. The guy was asked if he even knew what mercy was. The guy asked if they all saw how Jackson stole an item from this person, and if they spread such rumors based on words spoken in person, then who will be responsible if the situation changes in the opposite direction? Mason claimed that he had 100,000 on the card, and given his relationship with Jackson, he was ready to give him this money to resolve the situation. Alexander asked to describe the location so they could access the CCTV footage. The man asked how a university student dared to rob a worker. Jackson was just wondering, if he stole the root from him, why he didn't go to the police, but came to him, the student council. He asked Jackson to be reinstated, and his grandfather decided not to disgrace their university, so he told him that he had already come to resolve this issue. He asked Jackson to admit his mistake and said that the student council would be favorable to him. The man said that he was just a simple worker and could not cope with the city authorities. The main character began to say that he had never even met this old man and asked not to put on a show here. Of course, the man did not believe his words and asked where he got this root from then. Many people know what kind of family he comes from. Even if he went to the nearest mountain, it would take more than a day of travel and you would get it faster. You see, he can't actually tell him where he got the root. He doesn't even have 1 million to claim that he bought it. He doesn't know what to say, because he won't tell them that he got the root from another world. Jackson suggested calling the police since they didn't believe him. The man looked away at this selfish person. Instead of admitting his guilt and leaving the university, he preferred to let the university's reputation deteriorate. Everyone around him already believed this lie and began to persuade Jackson to confess. Then Michael appeared and said that he did not think that students from their university were capable of this. Michael added that such incidents negatively affect the reputation of the entire university, and he strongly condemned such behavior by students. One of the guys said that the university should not allow such students. Michael handed his grandfather a card with the amount of 200,000 and said that this was a small token of their apology. Michael wanted to explain why Jackson did this. Michael advised to simply arrest Jackson and not listen to any explanations. Michael said that in the end, this is the first person he liked. He believes in Jackson's character and does not consider him to be guilty. And the pillars have already begun to utter different versions of who was to blame for this. Michael recalled his words that Jackson would only bring shame to Grace. The girl stood, not knowing where to go. Her face expressed complete confusion. She was a prisoner of her own thoughts. At this time, the dean came and immediately told Grandpa that he had contacted Jackson's parents and he would be punished. Of course, the main character was angry, because nothing had been decided yet, and he was already drawing some conclusions. The dean continued to scold Jackson, thereby infuriating him. At this moment, the group of friends felt slightly wary. After these words, someone sharply typed in Jackson, causing his eyes to instantly be drawn to the screen or phone. As it turned out, it was his mother, who said that they had just received a call from the university and were on their way to see him. The last thing Jackson managed to say was that he had nothing to do with it. And here is a man, screaming in rage that it was her son who caused the death of his wife. He asked his mother not to worry, claiming that everything was not as she had heard. Just then, Grace approached him, extending her hand. She introduced herself as Jackson's girlfriend, and what was even more important was that she was the heiress of the company. The main character was surprised by the girl's act. His face expressed amazement. The girl continued to explain to her boyfriend's mother how it all happened. She asked him for Jackson because of such accusations. For some reason, everyone present thought that Jackson was simply using the girl for his own benefit. Michael said that Grace would never do anything that could endanger her family, which means that only he is to blame for the theft. After these words, unexpectedly for everyone, the girl again shouted for everyone to shut up. She said that everyone who slandered Jackson would be brought to justice. Moreover, as the girl stated, the lawyer and her family will strive for this to the end. And finally, she looked at Jackson and said that she would take care of everything and there was no reason to worry. At that moment, she clapped once, and someone appeared behind them. A man came to them and said that he was happy to see the girl's face again. She said she was glad to see Mr. Andrew, but asked him to avoid a Western accent. The man was slightly touched by these words, perceiving them as a gentle gesture and a manifestation of a sincere attitude. Then he turned to Jackson and said that he really was a man who was incredibly lucky. Then the girl decided to leave everything to the man, transferring to him the initiative and responsibility for the development of the situation. As it turns out, he is the company's lead lawyer, and it will be he who will handle Jackson's libel case. Everyone immediately thought of the world-famous legal team. Their legal advice cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, giving the impression of high status and influence to the legal team. Their schoolmate Grace hires people for hundreds of thousands an hour, and yet, how could her boyfriend then steal something worth $100,000 while remaining in the dubious position of the accused? Of course, Michael didn't expect Grace to go this far for Jackson. Now the lawyers began to question the man, carefully ascertaining the details and circumstances in order to carefully prepare for the upcoming libel case. Andrew asked for clarification on where his client stole. He was interested in the fact that his department indicated that he had no partner at all, no permanent job, and no way to get such an expensive route. The man began to get nervous, betraying his emotions and anxiety in such nervous gestures. Andrew asked if the man could take responsibility for his words. One of the students began to guess that all this could be a hoax. The foreigner speaks aggressively, claiming that an ordinary worker cannot argue with him. If the man cannot answer, they will take him to court for misinformation, libel, fraud, and other types of legal liability. The man began to say that he had no idea what the foreigner was talking about and asked everyone to watch how this foreigner was mocking him, a simple person. Then he began to crawl towards his feet, resorting to extreme measures to attract attention and evoke sympathy from those around him. Suddenly, the police abruptly intervened in the scene, having received a statement that he was blackmailing students, and now he must go with them. The man immediately began to turn to the guy who brought him and told him to help him. The brothers were surprised that he called him his brother. The guy started saying that he didn't even know him and asked not to approach him. The student could not understand what was starting to happen, because everything was going according to his plan. He insisted that no one should believe the old man, because he didn't even know him. Grace asked the president if he wanted his people to continue to be disgraced, and then asked if she should investigate further and find out who ordered this. The dean began to say that this was all unfair, because the accusation was false. They were both required to return to the police station to cooperate with the investigation. Those who were blackmailed also went with them to make a statement. Andrew said that since he was Jackson's lawyer, he would also go, expressing his willingness to provide legal support to his client in this situation. She thanked everyone and said it was time for them to run. The second brother offered to go after them and be there at this difficult moment. Everyone was of the same opinion, following them is bad. He asked if they wanted to see Jackson and Grace love each other. At this time, Jackson and Grace had apparently already finished all their business and were just standing there, admiring the sunset. The main character was ready to say something to the girl and turned to her. The girl was in full attention and looked at the guy. At first, she wanted to say for her mother that she did not know that she could tell him such things, but she also emphasized that she would not leave him in difficult times. He said that he liked her from the first meeting and offered to finally be together. Grace asked him to repeat it one more time, wanting to verify the authenticity of what was said. As it turned out, their friends had already decided to follow them. Jackson, for unknown reasons, said that she should refuse him, as he had done once. The girl said that if he did not repeat the confession now, then she would continue to say no. Grace said that he should come and confess his love when they have a date. When the guy arrived at the hostel, his friends immediately began to build scenes from what they saw. They repeated Grace's words exactly as she spoke at that moment. Of course, Jackson could not understand what they were doing, expressing his bewilderment. They started laughing and saying that they didn't think he was so romantic. Alexander, in turn, said that he stopped them, at least he tried. When asked what was so good about Jackson, Grace replied that he was better than all the men. The girl also asked her friend how things were going with her request. She said Jackson had 2 baskets of different herbs. She believed that he had to go through a lot, because he had changed so much. In addition, she was informed that he wanted to start an herbal business, and she was offered to work together, given that her family has the most extensive connections. She said that he would not work with her, but with his neighbor. Yes, that's true, but they will sell for a low price, and her family can sell for much more. She said that it was his decision and he genuinely treats the people around him well, so he would not agree to her help. But she can help him, without him knowing. She will inflate prices on the market. A friend said that it was not entirely clear that she was the smartest and best student at the university. The third brother was asked if he would spend the night here again today. Jackson realized that if they didn't know, there would be another commotion. They were jealous of him because he said that today he was with his sister. He asked them to stop and asked them what they were thinking at that moment. It is unclear why Jackson was thinking about Alice with a can of beer in the store. Jackson said he needed white and red wine, as well as beer. A few minutes later he was almost there. With this entire package in his hands, he fell fast asleep in order to be transported to another world. This is the time when a man woke him up in another world, creating a mysterious transition from sleep to a new reality. Jackson immediately began asking what happened, expressing concern and a desire to understand the events that had occurred. As it turns out, the Marquise is looking for him like crazy. Just at this time Alice came in, who was really angry. The man reported that Jackson was right in front of her. Marquise is never late for training. Today, not only was she late, but she also walked around half the city to find a guy. The Marquise asked the man to tell everyone to stop searching and not return, since she had something to tell Jackson in private. The main character realized that it was better for him to immediately apologize to the girl. She couldn't understand where he was, and he also managed to disappear from her without a single sound. He asked if she would believe it if he said he had returned to another world. Of course, Alice considered this nonsense and hit the table with such force that it simply split into pieces. Of course, Jackson did not expect such a turn of events and began to get nervous, feeling nervous about Alice's unexpected reaction. He decided to somehow divert attention and showed her what he had brought. Alice realized that it was wine, and not only that, she asked if he was really from another world, after which he confirmed her words. Alice thought it was really incredible, but perhaps he was an enemy spy. He began to make arguments that if he were a spy, why would he then save her? He would simply kill her. Since he was not a spy, he can continue to be her husband. No matter what happens, she will be able to protect him in any case. Alice, with a very menacing expression on her face, asked if he wanted to be her husband. He repeated almost 5 times that he really liked her and wanted to marry her. She promised that she would not tell his secret to anyone, unless he did not mind doing anything against her and the Great Kingdom. He promised that he would not do anything against her or her home, on the contrary, he would make their home better. She considered it a deal, and thus the residence ended up in his hands. She said that since they are husband and wife, they are one, naturally she trusts him. Finally, with a threatening tone, she said that if he deceives her, she will simply kill him. He couldn't figure out whether this was a heroin girl or a drunk. The man wondered why the Marquise, although she was looking for him, did not shout at him, as he expected. Unaware of this, the man became the object of everyone's attention, as the Marquise's soldiers, intending to turn the city upside down in search of him, caused general alarm, and now every inhabitant of the city is aware that he is lost. Jackson naturally did not imagine that she would be able to do something like that for his sake. Although very little time had passed between the Marchioness and Alice since their first meeting, the Marchioness, who could marry only once in her life, had already recognized him as the most significant person in her destiny. Jackson, whose attention was not particularly interested in the man's conversation, simply waved his hand and began to walk away. He stated that it is difficult to imagine anyone who could not admire a girl like Alice, but admitted that he already has a special person in his heart. The Crown Prince was angry because the previous time he had not gotten to the details regarding the Marquise's husband. His subordinates were aware of his guilt, but when this man suddenly appeared from among them, no trace of his past was found. All they know is that he appeared after the Marchioness was sent to the mountains to fight, and after her return he was there to save her. The prince could not understand whether they really believed these rumors. Next is a festive banquet at the Marquis' residence, where the prince intends to personally meet this Jackson. The Ministry of Military Affairs is forced to implement salary cuts for the Northern Army. It is possible that the army will not be able to afford to hold out through the winter, in which case the Marquise will be a loser. The prince believed that the Marquise was to blame for this situation. If she had married of her own choice, everything would have happened completely differently. It was at this point that Jackson also learned of the prince's intentions from the questionnaire. The celebratory banquet is intended for the army, so naturally it must correspond to the status of her future husband. He asked when this banquet would take place. Alice replied that the banquet would take place in 3 days, and asked how he planned to open this wine, warning that if he squeezed the bottle even more, it might simply crack. Jackson has never attended a banquet like this before and worries that he might embarrass himself. Alice began to reassure him, emphasizing that due to the fact that this was a holiday for the army, no one would find fault with him. Alice noticed that the bottle was sealed in a particularly clever way. The girl believed that the wine was simply magnificent, and the crystal bottle was so clear that it was probably worth a fortune. Jackson began to explain that in their world this wine is considered inexpensive, but he has difficulty conveying this concept. If they were truly rich, she wouldn't have to worry about making money for soldiers who weren't even provided with warm clothes. He asked if they had simply lost the war, that they weren't even getting paid. However, it turned out that there were no awards for victory in the war, and even the soldier's salary was cut. Unfortunately, Alice had already had a little too much alcohol, and Jackson realized that it was better for her to leave. He noticed that she had drunk too much and advised her to go to bed. She only managed to say that she did not want to beg these hypocrites from the war ministry, but she could not allow the soldiers to suffer like that. Although he does not feel love for her, still, he will take advantage of the benefits of this world, so he decides to help her. Jackson asked to call this man to his place. He clarified when all the records for so many years were placed in this house. He found out exactly how many resources the army needed in winter. As it turned out, 100,000 is needed only for winter clothes. Interested, Jackson was tormented by curiosity about how extensive the range of acquisitions for 100,000 could be. The fact that a set of warm clothes costs only $1 surprised Jackson. After doing some quick calculations, Jackson realized that $100,000 was equivalent to as much as $30 million in his world. Now he just had to figure out when exactly this money was needed. Unfortunately, the guy will need money in 10 days. The main character asked if the man had any ideas on how he could make money. The man could hardly believe that he really needed to earn 100,000 in 10 days. Jackson stated that he had no choice because he needed to help Alice. If he fails to find a way, he could even try to borrow from the son of the Minister of the Interior. He is known as a rich tiger who has $1 million in his hands. He could not understand why Alice did not ask him for a loan then. As it turned out, there was enmity between the two families, and the Marquise could not stand them, not wanting to show pliability. However, ultimately, the Marquise's reputation improved, and, despite the lack of possibility of a peace agreement, he decided to seek help himself. Of course, Jackson decided to at least try. The man said that he had already prepared a carriage for him. It was at this moment that Alice finally came to her senses after drinking the wine. She was informed that Jackson had just gone to the minister for money to raise funds for the army. After hearing this, Alice froze in place, not understanding what to do next. The guy suggested that perhaps he was trying too hard to prove himself. Alice realized that it was now too late to chase her husband. When the guy tried to say that if he borrowed this money, the Marquise's reputation would suffer, Alice quickly shut his mouth. He agreed with her words and noted that the subordinate talks too much. The prince's eastern palace will be the place where the action will unfold. The prince wondered if it was true that Jackson had gone to the minister to borrow money. His words are confirmed as he heads in the carriage to the 100 Flowers Pavilion. He couldn't believe that Jackson would decide to break the rules of the royal family. A few minutes later, Jackson had already arrived at the scene. The majestic 100 Flowers Pavilion spread its exquisite walls, where the prince's eastern palace witnessed this rare event. The main character decided to look out to see what it all looked like. In front of him stretched a pavilion of hundreds of flowers, a truly noble man's house, which aroused admiration for its exquisite architecture. When the guy's carriage arrived, everyone around him immediately realized that this was the Marquise's new husband. Jackson asked if the man still supported him. He exhaled and said that it was good. He understood everything. When they entered the house, Jackson immediately said that they needed to see the minister. And at this time a man approached them, who turned out to be the Marquise's husband. As expected, he could not hide his role from Jackson. It never occurred to him that his reputation could help an outsider discover his identity. He merely conveyed his invitation and expressed interest in helping the Marquise, asking to go upstairs to discuss matters in more detail. Jackson began talking about the need for 100,000 for the army. The minister expressed his readiness to offer him help if he was interested. It's unclear why, but Jackson suddenly felt his tense muscles relax. Of course, the minister was amazed at this sudden change in the guy's behavior. He asked Jackson again what he thought about this, but if he takes this money, he is afraid that it could let both his family and the army down. The minister did not quite understand what exactly Jackson meant. Indeed, it was strange, because she offers him money without any conditions and does not indicate when it should be returned. The minister noted that there was no need to communicate with him so rudely. Ultimately, it may also limit the army's supplies. The minister admitted that he had indeed underestimated Jackson and suggested that several girls be called in to discuss additional issues. The main character realized that something interesting was about to happen here, and thought that the minister was trying to suppress him if an agreement could not be reached. Of course, the girls who arrived immediately began to pester Jackson. They were getting closer and closer to him. Their family, although powerful, is on the verge of falling apart. Always on the verge of family breakdown, Jackson was forced to carefully make his plans in order to ensure his own well-being in the face of difficult family relationships. The minister's family has enormous wealth, while the Jackson family is powerful. A strong alliance between them can naturally become the most powerful force in their great country. If he accepts 100,000 from the Marquise family, he agrees to give 10,000 for his own needs. In addition, he has the opportunity to have fun with these girls. The minister again emphasized that all this is being done for the good of the family, since he does not want to see the Marquis isolated and helpless. Jackson agreed with his words and said that this was an excellent proposal. He invited the guy to relax today in his flower pavilion, and Jackson agreed to this vacation. The fact that Jackson said there was no need to think about this matter means that there will be no alliance with his family at all. He once again convincingly asked Jackson to think about it. because we are talking about as many as 100,000. He decided to bet that he could earn 100,000 by the end of the month. The minister, in turn, places a flower station for the pavilion. If anything, he asked what Jackson would bet, because he couldn't just make a bet without having anything. He offered to put his wish in return and do whatever the minister wanted, after which they made a deal. At this time, Alyssa was excited and waiting for Jackson at her house, feeling excited and looking forward to meeting him. He immediately asked Julian if she was awake, because he thought that she would sleep. She immediately asked if he had visited the minister, expressing her curiosity and interest in his affairs. He confirmed her words and said that it was necessary to talk about helping the army. Alice was unhappy and said that it was not his problem, expressing her disagreement with his interference in the situation. She could not understand who he was to deal with money on behalf of the Marchioness. The man advised her to admit her mistake. Alice was furious and asked again who allowed him to go to him. Jackson was informed that the Marchioness ordered him to kneel and be punished. He couldn't believe that she actually ordered him to kneel, but since he had no choice, and was simply forced, he obeyed. He was informed that if the Marquis did something wrong, he must kneel and be punished. The main character, calling Alice the Marchioness, asked if she was sure that she wanted him to kneel before her. Indeed, at that moment she began to think. She decided that he would forget about it and just sit in prison, repenting for his actions. Finally, with a very condemning look and voice, he said that he understood Alice. As it turned out, Alice was touched by the fact that Jackson simply called her Marquise, and not by name. If her grandfather found out that Jackson went to borrow money from the minister and was not punished severely, he would cause a stir. It would be better for her to punish him than for her grandfather to kick him out of the family. The man began to say that it was not what she thought and that he did not borrow money from her family. He even refused a bribe from his family in the form of a beautiful woman and a lot of money. Alice couldn't understand why the man didn't say so right away. In addition, Alice began to report that Jackson bet with his family that he could earn 100,000 in 10 days. Everyone present could not believe what was said. Jackson was obviously offended by Alyssa and didn't expect her to be like this. He simply called her the feudal marquise. The principal understood that even if all their family's stores were sold out, they still would not be able to earn 100,000, and then Jackson bet that he could earn it in 10 days. The prince, his eyes shining with pleasure, emphasized that this time the minister truly deserved praise for his outstanding work. He made it clear that all these efforts are aimed at the benefit of the crown prince, who is known to be contemplating the possibility of taking on a responsible position in the highest office. 2 brothers from his family have successfully achieved high positions, and it seems that his family is aiming to achieve even greater heights. In conclusion, all efforts are aimed at serving His Highness more effectively. The prince noted that he was worthy of a high position, emphasizing his right to occupy a high position. However, Alice decided to approach Jackson, most likely to apologize to him. He decided to clarify whether her intentions had changed, or whether she preferred that he kneel as a sign of repentance. She emphasized that she was ready to speak in his defense, but did not want this to negatively affect the reputation of their family. In response, he realized that he could sense how he managed to ruin her family's reputation. Explaining the situation, she said that he rushed to make a bet to earn 1,000 in 10 days, expressing doubts about his ability to win. She also emphasized that even if she wanted, it would be difficult for her to help him in this matter. She expressed her thoughts, noting that if he decided to make a bet, it means that he is confident in his abilities. At the same time, she emphasized the importance of mutual trust, but admitted that now it is difficult for her to believe even a single word he says. Alice had difficulty understanding how she could believe the possibility of him earning such a huge sum in just 10 days. He stated that in this case, it might be best for him to decide on a divorce. Alice reacted aggressively, saying that divorce would be the only option if something extremely serious happened, such as his death or her death. Jackson decided to resort to manipulation and stated that, in his opinion, all the decisions had already been made and nothing would change. At this moment, Alice's gaze changed dramatically. However, the main character seems to have uttered these words in vain, and Alice herself emphasized, telling him that this was a very bad idea. She said Jackson could leave, but warned that someone, possibly a man, should keep an eye on him. The main character emphasized that he definitely needs a divorce, since this stormy scene does not bring him anything good. Alice went somewhere, and, left alone in the room, she began reading, probably some kind of letter. It turned out that her intention was indeed to sell all the stores owned by her family. Of course, considering that Jackson is her husband, she should of course help him. Jackson believed that he was being deceived a second time, but immediately began to deny this fact. Jackson agreed to one, but not to more repetitions. To cope with this, the guy needed the help of a man, and he was going to start taking this help into account tomorrow morning. The whole of China is watching him, waiting for him to fail, but he needs to earn 100,000 in 10 days. Jackson asked the man to bring a razor. Jackson headed towards the gates of the Marquis' mansion. The guard was very surprised to notice new hair on the man, and it turned out that they hadn't actually changed since he just tied them into a ponytail. He explained that Jackson gave him this haircut and claimed that it suits him. He asked the man if he remembered the techniques he taught him. The main character began counting to 3 to begin his action. He shouted that he could earn more than 100,000 in 10 days. After that, he added that the man did even better than expected. Jackson inquired with interest whether the auction house was part of the family business, showing interest and a desire to learn more. Yes, but in recent years the family's business has grown so large that their auction house was temporarily closed for a couple of years. They need another 120,000, which he mentioned yesterday. It should be his own money, he does not need financial support from family sources. Jackson assured that he would return the money in 10 days and asked him not to worry. He claims that he is unable to earn 100,000 this way and would prefer to try something else, in particular, doing advertising. Alice realized that even selling all the stores would not bring enough funds to achieve her goal. The servant began to ask what would happen when the stores were sold, expressing doubts about whether all this was worth doing for the sake of some unknown person, and he was sure that Jackson did not deserve it. The Marchioness stated that her and her husband's affairs were her family's business, and expressed the opinion that he was trying to interfere in the affairs of her family. Alice suddenly noticed that many pieces of paper were scattered all over the city, giving the strange impression of a storming event or an unexpected announcement. People around could not understand who could afford to scatter so much paper so randomly. As it turned out, the source of these papers was the family's auction house. The servant advised Alice to better intervene and stop her husband, warning that he seemed to be trying to deceive everyone, and the consequences of this could be unpredictable. As it turned out, those present finally noticed the Marquis. They immediately began asking whether all the information presented on the papers was true. Grace began to explain that it was all a mistake. Of course, the guy was furious about the whole situation, while Alice remained quite calm. Just at that moment a prince, one might say, appeared to them. Everyone immediately knelt down to greet him. Alice noted that it was an honor for her to meet the prince. The prince noted that girls do not have to be polite. He asked everyone to return and wait, promising to consider what divine things the family would provide at the auction. Everyone was eagerly awaiting the start of this auction. The prince asked not to thank him and assured that he would bring with him all the residents of the capital to express their support. Alice simply remained silent after these words. The prince then politely bade her farewell. Alice, deciding that the moment was right, proposed returning to the house, gathering her retinue around her and heading towards the mansion. She decided not to disturb him and just follow the development of events, because the story was not over yet. After these words, the guy flared up with rage at Jackson. Everything previously presented had already sold out, and Jackson stayed up all night realizing the consequences of his actions. Everything was true, because if he did not sleep, he would not be able to move to another world. The man asked if he could really make money this way. Jackson asked to be given the opportunity to rest, assuring that everything would be fine soon. Jackson said that he was going to sleep, adding that, by the way, it might take a day or two. The main character stated that when he returns, the man will see everything for himself. He also asked the man not to allow anyone to come near him for the next 2 days. The man is still not sure that they will succeed, because he gave him everything. And a second later the guy was already nearby, and the man was shocked by what was happening. When the guy was already in his world, Alexander called him. He asked to check Jackson's bank card because the first installment of the money for the herbs had already been deposited into his account. He asked him to help, as he needed a pair of powerful walkie-talkies. He will have to rent his own place to support his transition to another world. He was fully charged and motivated to make 100,000 in 10 days. A kid on the street thought Jackson was acting like some kind of crazy person, and Grace at this time was just lying in her room, sad. A friend asked why she had such bags under her eyes. As it turned out, she was informed that Jackson had been living in a hotel near the school for the last 2 days. The friend thought that perhaps Jackson had decisively cheated on her friend. Well, of course, Grace didn't think so. She believed in the image of Jackson that the information she read presented to her, and she completely trusted him. She reflected that if he really wanted to, he could just come to her. And at that moment she was informed that Jackson was looking for her. She instantly flushed with joy that, oddly enough, Jackson was looking for her. She told her friend that she couldn't go to lunch with her. She apologized for this and assured her friend that next time she would definitely treat her. The girl expressed the opinion that love is more important than friendship, and at that moment she thought about Alexander. She herself could not understand why her thoughts immediately turned to this guy. and at that moment Alexander sneezed, as if in response to the fact that someone remembered him. As Jackson walked down the street, he heard a familiar voice from behind. The girl immediately ran to him and pounced to hug him. After that, Jackson realized that he really missed him. The guy explained that he had been busy in recent days, but despite this, he brought her a gift. He wasn't sure if she would like it, but he thought it was a good gift for her. It was clear from the girl's reaction that she really liked it and would treasure this gift. She politely asked Jackson to put the gift on her, which he, in principle, began to follow after a few seconds. He quickly took his phone out of his pocket and looked at the screen. As it turns out, his parents have just arrived by train and are heading to his university. He couldn't understand why they were here because they told him that they would return home next week. His parents came to see his girlfriend to see that she was real. He added that his parents were also planning to spend some time in the city, and he told the girl that they had recently gone on a short trip together. The mother realized deep down that her son might be hiding something from her, and the assumption arose that he simply did not feel the desire to share this part of his life with her. Finding that his parents had not only already gotten off the train, but had also successfully settled into the bus, he began to wonder why they had left him in such a hurry, and what they might be hiding behind this unexpected haste. Jackson blurted out that he was looking forward to meeting them and his girlfriend. At this time, those who were ready to share some important information came to Michael. Anger raged within him because he tried to blackmail Jackson, but his devious tricks failed and he was left with his plans of destruction in vain. His family also belonged to a prestigious circle, and the question, asked with a certain amount of concern, sounded like a test to see if he considered such behavior offensive to his noble family. He asked a question, expressing doubt as to whether he really understood how much Grace liked Jackson, and in his mind came to the conclusion that when they first met in the summer, there should be no special manifestations of kindness or mutual understanding between Grace and Jackson. Now he has to become the heir of his family, which brings pressure, especially in connection with Grace, but at the moment he is powerless and cannot do anything. Michael noticed that Jackson's parents were here, and he had a clue that they might be planning something. Deciding to take a bold step after feeling humiliated by him himself, Michael decided to test whether Jackson could bear and dare to humiliate his own parents. Asking if there was truth to the statement that they were powerless to do anything to Jackson while they were here, he tried to find out how true this information was and what the possible consequences for Jackson were. Michael stated that this time it would be different because Grace's presence had become something he truly desired. Picking up the phone, Michael dialed Grace's number and expressed a desire to talk to her. So, as Jackson predicted, he and Grace came to meet their parents. The mother believed that her son was probably begging the girl to start dating him. Grace shared her feeling of luck, saying she was lucky to be with Jackson. The mother said her son took charge and carried the bag. However, Grace recommended that he put his things in a bag for his uncle, announcing that they would go to restaurants for now. The father complimented Jackson, noting that he had a wonderful girlfriend. At this moment, Michael, being on the sidelines, carefully watched all this. Mom was delighted with the restaurant in the big city. Mom suggested that Dad give them a nice dinner. The waiter notified him that their VIP table had been reserved and paid for, inviting him to enjoy the treat. Mom made up the idea that this restaurant requires prepayment, but she couldn't figure out how they could afford Grace to pay for them, because, in her mind, they were the ones who were going to bear this expense. The mother asked not to worry and just enjoy the food, adding the words to eat for health. Mom announced that Jackson, being a student, does not earn money, and therefore she plans to transfer him some more money for living expenses. Mom believed that the mention of Grace being the heiress of the company was said to reassure them. However, she added that this is indeed true and that Grace is indeed the heir to her family. At the moment of this information, the father's face underwent a noticeable change, caused by the unexpected revelation of Grace's status in the family. Naturally, my mother could not immediately accept in her head that Jackson, who came from an ordinary family, could choose a wife from such a noble family. She announced that if her aunt and uncle did not approve of this option, then she was ready to refuse the inheritance. Jackson began to explain that his mother was simply suggesting not to take it all too seriously. He added that as long as they are happy together, they do not care about any status, and they will be happy with any development of events. It was at this time that Grace's mother appeared, creating a new twist in the situation. Jackson's parents immediately sensed the tension created by the appearance of Grace's mother. Grace's mother was surprised to not understand how Jackson decided to call her aunt. The girl couldn't figure out what her mother was doing here, given that Jackson's parents were present. She asked her daughter to let her go and headed to the table. She came here today with the purpose of considering what kind of parents could raise a son who causes such shameful moments. Jackson's mom asked her to sit down and discuss it over dinner. She noted that if it had not been for the first meeting, she and her family would not have had the privilege of being here and being treated to food. However, the woman emphasized that their family could afford to pay for food. She asked the waiter to tell him how much they spent on this lunch. Grace declared that enough was enough and suggested they return home to discuss everything in a more private setting. In turn, her mother insisted that the waiter tell them how much they spent. Jackson's parents expected something fantastic, and now it turns out that they did indeed spend no less than $23,508 in total, confirming that the evening was spectacular and far from ordinary. After this moment, Jackson's mother finally believed that the girl was indeed the heiress of the company, realizing the impressive sums spent on the dinner and recognizing the impressive status of the Grace family. The woman said that her son was unworthy of her daughter, who was on a completely different level. Of course, Jackson's mother instantly felt tense after hearing these words. She asked her husband to go to the bank and get the money, promising that they would return the money to Grace's family. Grace asked not to be misunderstood, clarifying that her intentions were to treat them and her aunt to a good meal, nothing more. Jackson explained that his parents might misunderstand her intentions. The son assured that he would take control of everything and ask his neighbor to take them. However, the woman asked them why their son was interested in her daughter, especially since he took $1 million from her. Of course, the mother was surprised to hear the figure of $1 million. Grace asked who brought her mother here. Of course, she immediately thought of Michael and asked if he was the one who brought her mother here. After Grace's mother showed her reaction, she immediately started calling somewhere. She called the investment department, asking to be notified that investments in one of the family's projects had been withdrawn. She added that the meeting was no longer required, and there was no need to carry out her previous order. Of course, the mother was furious, because she was losing a lot, given that the project was promising. Grace said that she was her daughter and her mother could not do anything with her, but at the same time emphasized her status as the heiress of the company. Jackson's parents could not foresee what would happen next. Jackson was amazed at what all the fuss and tension in the family situation had gone into. The woman said that she was really too blinded. The mother nevertheless agreed to talk at home and asked her to hang up. This was not surprising, because the woman herself raised such a daughter. Grace immediately started apologizing and saying that her mother was very rude. But Jackson's mom was only interested in one thing, or did he really take $1 million from her family? Grace asked her not to worry about it and said that she would sort everything out. Jackson said that he couldn't blame her for leaving now because she needed it. Still, Grace began to leave and told him to call her. The mother asked her if what the girl said was true, to which she received a positive answer. Jackson was confused, unable to find the right words to respond. His parents expressed their willingness to sacrifice everything and strongly advised him not to get involved with this girl. The main character said that he would take all the worries upon himself, adding that as long as his sister liked him, he was not going to leave her. Mom noted that he seemed happy, but noticed that he noticed her family's attitude towards him. He understands everything, but she herself confirms it, telling him what he likes. The strict mother told him to stop communicating with her and emphasized that he would give everything he owed. Jackson responded that she now had the opportunity to be a sister in a different sense, implying a change in their relationship. The wife asked her husband to give her a bank card. He is able to make his own decisions because this bank card was intended for his wedding. With their father, they ask him for one thing, not to use people and act with a clear conscience. Jackson was a little shocked after all this. Jackson felt a slight sense of loss, somewhat confused after everything that had happened, and it was at this point in their circle that Jackson's friends appeared, ready to support him during a difficult period. They noted that he is a real hard worker and does not even warn them when his parents arrive. The woman noticed that her son talked a lot about his friends. One of the friends noted that he always kept an eye on Jackson. Alexander then entered the room, smiling, and warmly greeted Jackson's mother. He learned everything from his sister, who asked them to come and support his company and also meet his parents. His sister remained just as caring and attentive, but it was difficult for them to be together when her family treated him with some disdain. He just wanted to make some money, but now he has a purpose and meaning in the process. Alexander seemed to understand what Jackson was talking about. He strived to create a business and empire that would rival his sister's. Of course, Alexander was shocked after such words from his friend, but despite this, he still stated that he was ready to help him. Jackson expected Alexander to tell him that he was just a dreamer. Well, Alexander replied that people should always dream, and this is not a problem. Late that evening, Jackson lay with a backpack in his hands, ready to plunge into another world. He spent the afternoon at the university with his parents, but despite this, something still bothered him. Mom hasn't called since she got home. The items needed for the auction were indeed purchased by Alexander. First he has to win an argument in that world, and then return back here. Today is the day of returning to another world. Of course, immediately upon awakening, he found himself in another world, with a backpack in his possession. But he had one problem. He didn't get enough sleep at all and really wanted to sleep. At this time, an old man ran into the room and said that he was glad to finally see him. Jackson told him he almost sent him back. The man almost cried and felt joy that Jackson was back. The main character asked if he was afraid that he had run away, but he replied that he was loyal to him and believed in him. He was interested in only one question, whether Jackson succeeded. He suggested that he not worry, because now everything will become clear, and he will demonstrate it personally. At the Marquise's house, the servant said that he had sold the documents for the stores, but they still needed $3,000. Remembering that the guy from the Chamber of Commerce wanted her halberd, she offered to sell it to him for $3,000, but it was her favorite weapon. Alice did not listen to him and asked him to act and not throw around words. At that moment, she mentally turned to Jackson and told him that he needed to stop. The guy realized that it was useless to dissuade Alice, and simply agreed with her. At this time, the prince was informed that a dragon halberd had been brought. At the Chamber of Commerce, they started talking about the dragon halberd, discussing its unique characteristics and possible uses. The prince could not believe that they had sold not only their property, but also the dragon halberd, her weapon. Jackson did not leave his hiding place, and Alice actively sold her family's property to raise enough money for him. Now the prince realized that Jackson really was a failure. The young gentleman named Oscar was sincerely sorry that the Marquise had come to the point where she was selling her favorite weapon. He stated that none of his family could cope with the conspiracy that was directed against them. It is not in their interests to support a fading family, especially since they have a stupid marquis. If the Chamber of Commerce wants to sell something, this is undoubtedly the most important thing for them. Naturally, this is dissemination of information so that everyone knows. Oscar thought Jackson was an extremely interesting person. If Jackson can really sell divine items, then this will be a way out of this situation. He could not believe that such divine things really existed. The man asked if Jackson was truly immortal. Jackson replied that he could say so and reminded the man that he had once doubted him. He immediately began to apologize and assured that he would not dare to doubt him again. It all ended with the words that they would soon see magic. Alice entered the auction house looking smart, attracting everyone's attention with her elegant appearance. The prince pointedly asked what Alice was doing here. Alice replied to the prince that Jackson was currently preparing inside, and she went outside to meet and greet the guests. The prince remarked that their family was great until Alice married Jackson, but Alice reassured him, saying that her family remained the same as before. In parting, he remarked that she was too stubborn. Carefully examining the surroundings, Jackson noticed that many foreigners had gathered in this place. At this time, the man sought to meet with the young marquis, having an important matter to discuss. Expressing his admiration, he noted that their auction house had not had such an atmosphere of liveliness and activity for a long time. Of course, because who among us, while in the capital, has the desire to see with our own eyes how the enemy's family is dishonored? In this merriment, a servant conducted her to the place reserved for her on this solemn occasion. He reported to her that many people from the capital had arrived here today. Alice simply called them a bunch of scum, pronouncing these words with a hint of contempt, as if she was putting their insignificance on the same level. In the midst of events, the king arrived. Alice greeted the king and also her uncle. The man, indeed, left the impression of being extremely healthy and, apparently, strong, which is not surprising for a king who embodies power and fortitude. Immediately speaking, he expressed the opinion that the husband she had found did not meet the standards of the royal family. Having learned about this, he invited her to take 100,000, confident that this amount would help her cope with the pressing problems of the army. However, she could not accept his money, and he had to be aware of this. The crown prince has a high intelligence and can easily cope with any difficult situation. She was confused, unable to decide whether to marry him or support his terrible ideas. If she had the opportunity, her family could have taken a neutral position, but her husband, too trusting, rushed to decisions, creating difficulties. She demanded that her husband not be judged, insisting that his situation and motives be understood. In conclusion, he noted that she was exactly the same as her father, and expressed the opinion that her family did not deserve to stay in the capital. The auction is almost ready to begin, and the marquise appears to be quite impressed with the upcoming event. However, Jackson does not seem to be doing all this for her sake. They didn't care what emotions this event or that sum of 100,000 would cause in her. Jackson clearly did not want to stay with her. Daniel could not understand what the guy was talking about, because the marquise was sincerely devoted to him. In bewilderment, he asked if this was so. then why she did not listen to him and did not believe in his words. He was right, he was immortal, he did not belong to this world, and his home was in another dimension. Meanwhile, viewers were eager for the show and couldn't understand why it hadn't started yet. Alice could barely restrain herself from covering everyone's mouths, experiencing a mixture of irritation and bewilderment. The minister believed that difficult times would come for their family. Finally, Alice could not stand it and asked who would dare to say his last name to the one who was creating noise in her auction house. Of course, everyone fell silent. Only one guy broke the silence, expressing the opinion that Alice remains herself. It turned out that it was the fourth prince, who claimed that no member of the aristocracy would dare to get involved with this marquise, even if it offended the prince himself. Suddenly, Oscar shouted from the balcony and asked if His Highness was surprised by what was happening. He inquired which prince was not prepared to change his position, emphasizing that if the Marchioness had been more flexible, their family would probably not be here at the moment. For his brothers, the current situation was extremely insulting. He believed that it was wise to destroy what was unattainable as a way to cope with the lack of what one wanted. The prince actually analyzed the situation in the capital. He would be very interested in meeting Jackson from her family. The servant felt perplexed as he wondered why it would be easier to simply hand over the sum of 100,000 to his husband instead of getting involved in complicated scenarios and intrigues. She explained that the dispute concerned the profit of 100,000, because the proceeds from the auction are a form of profit. After a few seconds, everyone expected something incredible, being in an atmosphere of anticipation. Jackson didn't think they had any interest in hearing anything more from him, so he suggested they skip straight to the beginning of the auction. He began to imagine the first divine item that was capable of reproducing light and emitting bright light, even without the use of fire. He was ready to show the audience what he had prepared for the performance. Of course, everyone froze, in a state of anticipation. As it turned out, it was an ordinary lantern, but in this world it acquired something special. Jackson, in general, named the object after himself. Of course, everyone present could not understand how this object could provide illumination. Questions began to arise as to whether this was all he wanted to show them, and how this object could be considered divine. One of the princes believed that this was something previously unknown. Alice immediately offered Jackson 5,000 for the item. Of course, people could not immediately understand how they could become owners of this item. The servant would be ready to immediately eliminate anyone who dares to speak negatively about the marquis. In order to maintain her reputation, the marquise decides to personally participate in the auction. Jackson gave Daniel a sign that meant they should begin. The man asked to turn off the lights, close the windows and lower the curtains. After a few seconds, everything started to happen. And then, at that moment, all the lights just went out, as if someone had turned off a switch. Suddenly, for no apparent reason, everyone suddenly became frightened, as if something invisible had gripped them with fear. Everyone that evening had to set their main task to protect the king, and after a few seconds the light appeared. The crowd looked in surprise at the bright light in the sky, but without any visible flame, and could not understand how this was possible. He asked them not to panic, explaining that all this was just an example of how the lantern works. The minister seemed to realize that this was indeed something divine. Alice herself already agreed that it was truly incredible. The fourth prince became curious about what else he could surprise them with. Oscar decided to pay 8,000 for this incredible item. The servant began to persuade the master, claiming that there might be luminous stones inside. Oscar was sure that the whistling stones never shone so brightly, and expressed his conviction by ignoring the servant. If it were really such an amazing glowing stone, it would be difficult to find, Oscar thought. Jackson asked if they still suspected it was just some kind of trick. Jackson eagerly asked Daniel to lead his guests to the front row, wanting them to see and appreciate with their own eyes the extraordinary glowing object that was causing so much excitement and doubt in their gathering. In front of him, he wondered whether it was just a trick, or whether Jackson actually possessed a divine item. The minister was sure that even if this was the case, it must be a family treasure, because this person was clearly not a high-ranking person. When the man showed the glowing object to the people, observers could definitely confirm that it was definitely not a glowing stone. Daniel reminded that this item functions without the use of fire. Of course, Jackson was pleased to see the surprised expressions on their faces. Jackson, wanting to maintain the mystery of his new acquisition, strictly forbade Alice to direct her gaze to what was happening. Of course, the servant flared with rage. His anger knew no bounds when it became clear that he was forbidden to participate in this mysterious event. But Alice did not argue about this matter, simply agreeing to the condition imposed by Jackson. She felt that he still blamed her for everything, realizing that there were unresolved differences and tension between them. Daniel then handed the lantern to Oscar. He declared that it was so exquisite that it deserved to be called a divine object. He asked the servant to ignite the glowing lantern, creating a moment of anticipation in which everyone eagerly awaited the amazing sight. A sky lantern rose into the sky, illuminating the dark heavenly space with its mystical light. This lantern became a symbol for Oscar's family to take this incredible object, the embodiment of a mysterious story that seemed to connect them to divine secrets and heritage. The man clarified that this means that no matter how much money any person who lights the lantern offers, he will be able to buy it for any amount. He could not remember how many years had passed since he had been in this house, and he could not judge how long he had been a stranger in this place. Alice noticed that this was only Jackson's first item, and he still had some trump cards in his hands, which made his collection even more exciting and mysterious. The prince and the minister were furious about the whole situation, disagreeing with how events were unfolding and feeling that control of the situation was slipping out of their hands. The guy thought that most likely it was just curiosity rather than a true intention to help the royal family, and his thoughts were filled with doubts about Jackson's true motives. But the prince had come here to see Jackson disgrace himself, and now he himself was the center of attention. As for this second divine object, which turns everything into a picture, it became the object of everyone's attention and anticipation. Jackson asked the guest sitting in front to come closer, wanting to share with him a close look at the second divine object. It provided him with a full view of the auction house, demonstrating how the second divine item covered the entire area. They realized that it was indeed a painting, discovering that the second divine object represented something unique and exciting in the world of art. Besides, even a great artist could not create such a picture, they realized, admiring the subtlety of detail and the magic inherent in every stroke. Jackson asked not to worry, claiming that everyone who came to the auction would receive one of these paintings, thereby revealing the secret of their magic and emphasizing the generosity of his intentions. Of course, they could not believe this, because, in their opinion, to create such paintings it took a very long time to paint. The idea of an instantaneous appearance of a work of art seemed to them something incredible. Jackson asked Daniel to bring the following items, causing general curiosity and anticipation of what else amazing he would present at this auction. Oscar was sure that Jackson was not stupid at all, he was too smart, and each new item presented at the auction emphasized his cunning and skill in managing the situation. The fourth prince called Jackson incredible, expressing admiration for his extraordinary abilities and ability to surprise. The lady along with him could not understand why he said that. The world is full of people, and not everyone strives for wealth. There are those who prefer to appreciate the moments. Sometimes such a painting is not valued in money, and even if there is too much of it, it helps the artist create his unique name. So, the family has such a person, and it will be much easier for them, thanks to his talents and ability to create valuable works of art. Jackson announced that they could finally move on to the divine item that could turn everything into a painting. Oscar was in anticipation of something new and divine, preparing to once again be amazed by the amazing properties of the art presented by Jackson. The entire room was ready to grab the next item at eye-popping prices. Jackson took out his camera and took pictures of the people closest to him. People immediately began offering $50,000 per item, expressing their readiness to add this amazing divine artifact to their collections. The main character said that this is already the second divine item. The fourth prince remarked that he found it difficult to appreciate the paintings because they were too pretentious for his taste. He was more interested in watching the expression on his brother prince's face than in the painting itself, seeing how his brother reacted to what was happening around him. The minister saw this as a cause for concern for the prince, reminding him that sooner or later it would become known where he got these amazing objects from. He had better follow the advice and act as he says, otherwise he will face reprisals, the prince warned. In the end, as it turned out, someone offered as much as $130,000 for the camera, emphasizing the high value of this unique item in the eyes of auction participants. Jackson announced that if no higher bids were received, the camera would go to the person who offered the specified amount. The guys decided that it was better for them not to spend money, but to simply stop fighting for this divine item. Oscar thanked for the kindness and expressed his gratitude. Jackson began to congratulate Mr. Oscar, expressing his congratulations on the successful completion of the auction. And then the minister realized that the two purchased items had already exceeded the expected amount by $100,000. Jackson stated that it was time for a real splash, implying that the most amazing and divine items were yet to come, preparing to surprise the audience with something more exciting. He presented this item as an object with which one can communicate at a distance. The king stated that if this item was real, then he, as the ruler, should be given the right to receive it. The fourth prince called the girl his sister and asked her to lend him some money. She was flattered to hear him call her his sister, but she did not hide the fact that he was losing face by uttering such words. By lighting the lantern again, Oscar's family filled the evening with magic, illuminating their home with bright light. The servant could not understand why he did this, because until that moment he had not even seen anything that could push him to such a decision. Although the previous 2 divine items seemed fantastic, this latest one turned out to be no less valuable. Alice was amazed at what her husband was able to achieve, and her eyes twinkled with admiration at his achievements. She truly began to believe that he was immortal. The main character asked who can defeat an army that can see the enemy at any moment and control the battlefield and the army. If their army had such a wonderful item, they would be able to win many battles. If this item was truly capable of transmitting a message over 100 miles, the possibilities of communication and information exchange with its help became exciting and promising. Then this divine object should have ended up with the 4th prince. The king shared exactly the same opinion, confirming the unity of views with the 4th prince. Jackson was ready to show them the divine objects that they had been dreaming and waiting for so long. The last divine item was presented. Taking the walkie-talkie in his hands, he asked if they could hear him. He was told that they could hear him perfectly well, and said that they had arrived in a city that was 80 miles away and were continuing to move north. A horse needs to be saddled and it takes them about a couple of days to get there. Jackson, in a hurry, announced that the furthest city they had now reached was the only city within range, but he assured that the divine item was capable of communicating over 800 miles. Of course, Oscar couldn't believe it when he heard the number 800. Traveling 800 miles takes a month and a half to receive a message, but if used in business, it conveys the blink of an eye, promising significant improvements in the efficiency and speed of information exchange. He even brought an extra battery for this thing. The sky lantern of the prince and also the king rose into the sky. Jackson couldn't believe that all this was really happening to him, and his heart sank in surprise. Daniela reported that the 13 sky lanterns never happened. Jackson offered to give Alice 100,000, promising her freedom in exchange for his life. He didn't agree to go with Jackson. The guy advised him not to rush to answer, since he had not yet completed the auction. He announced that bidding for the 3rd divine item would start at 300,000. At this time, Alice stood up and said that their family did not intend to sell this item. Of course, everyone present was shocked by such words. She said she would explain everything to Jackson later. Of course, Jackson was annoyed and began to say that she had no right to do this. But after a few seconds the guy was simply knocked out from behind. People could not understand what the Marquise was doing with her husband. The crowd thought that it was all too childish and that the 13 sky lanterns were just a joke to them. She reiterated that if she said they wouldn't sell, that meant they wouldn't sell. Daniel announced that the auction was over and asked everyone to return home. Oscar said they would probably go and asked where they could get divine items. Daniel said that he would take the young master and give him the divine items. The men believed that it was not even worth spending time buying a painting. At this time, the king approached them from behind. He frankly admitted that her husband turned out to be completely different from what he had imagined, and his previous judgments about him turned out to be erroneous. In parting, Alice barely made the necessary request for her uncle to take care of himself. Alice asked that the last item be returned to the Northern Army and instructed that it be left under the care of her soldiers, and she personally promised to take Jackson to his house. The 4th prince, stepping forward, brought even more mystery into the atmosphere. Expressing a desire to meet in person, he added that he would be glad to get to know him personally. A few hours later, Jackson came to his senses, refreshed by the time of rest that gave him the opportunity to recover. Alice frankly admitted that she gave the order to knock him out. The main character remembered this, and his mind was completely absorbed by this information. She asked him if he knew what would happen if he decided to sell the 3rd item. He admitted that he had no idea of the consequences, because he was simply following the rules, trying to make money. In his opinion, the radio station could be sold for at least 600,000. Having failed to obtain the necessary funds, he discovered that his radio station had been stolen. He finds it difficult to believe that the family and she personally could commit such an act. Alice admitted that she personally carried it out, arguing that her family shouldn't be blamed for it. This time she admitted her guilt, promising that such actions would not happen again. Jackson asked if he had the opportunity to find a solution this time, or if he would be punished again under the family law. This time, even if he could not find a solution on his own, she promised him her help, emphasizing that being together as husband and wife was not just words. He begged her to forget what happened and stated that the radio station was his gift, and the funds received from the auction were a kind of exchange for his freedom. She couldn't understand what kind of freedom he was talking about. Alice flushed with rage, imagining a sword at her neck. She once again reminded that they could not get a divorce. He replied that if this was the case, then she could very well kill him. Her thoughts were interrupted by a moment of silence as she became lost in thought, unspeakable emotions flashing through her eyes. The girl said that he can already do whatever he wants, but they will not get divorced. In addition, she promised to return the money received at the auction to him. Then, without saying a word, Alyssa simply walked away from Jackson. The guy even thought that she was going to kill him at the moment. But he still has to find a way to get out of here. At this time he noticed that the sun was above his head. And then it dawned on him that it was already the second day and he still had not returned to his world. Previously, he always found himself in another world during sleep. But for some reason this time the transition did not happen. Just at that moment Daniel ran up to him. The man reported that he went into his room, but discovered that he was not there either. As it turned out, the minister was waiting for him in the main hall. Jackson hurried towards the main hall, aware that his duties and responsibilities to the minister came first. And when Jackson entered the hall, he saw that the guy was actually sitting there, waiting for him. The main character walked in and immediately apologized for the long wait. He immediately expressed admiration, noting that Jackson had surprised him and opened his eyes. The guy really turned out to be overly kind. He handed him the land deed, gave him a whole bunch of flowers and agreed that Jackson had one in this situation. Jackson, reading carefully, emphasized how the guy was extremely polite and generous in his actions. He also expressed his intention to ask Jackson a question. Of course, this guy intended to ask about all the modern things that he had probably heard about, but knew little about. He said that he would tell everything later so that his wife would not find out about it. He stated that he did not understand why she behaved this way, because he knew her like the back of his hand, but could not understand the reasons for her strange behavior. In that case, they simply said goodbye and Jackson left him. Daniel revealed that the building, called the 100 Flowers Pavilion, is actually known as a brothel in their country, and it brings in significant income every day. The man tried to stop him, warning him that it was better for him to avoid visiting the brothel for now. The minister wondered whether Jackson was actually considering taking some action against them. Jackson decided to put aside the thoughts that this guy was deceiving them. It seemed to him that it was time to celebrate the holiday. And after all, Royal Highness should also have his own plans. As the Marquise's husband, he should not visit a brothel. Besides, if the Marquis kicks him out, not a single decent family will want to accept him. Jackson said it's even better because he doesn't want to stay here and live. A man in a carriage arrived silently, arousing curiosity with his unexpected appearance. A carriage that suddenly appeared on the horizon, which turned out to be the prince's carriage, attracted the attention of all those present with its luxury and majesty. The prince, leaving the carriage, approached with dignity, causing silent admiration and awe in the atmosphere. When the fourth prince got out of the carriage, he declared that even if he did not have the courage, he would not dare to kill the Marquis's husband. The man immediately lowered his head and bowed before the prince in greeting. Then he turned to his master, that is, to Jackson. The prince turned to Jackson and asked if he thought it necessary to kneel as well. The fourth prince said that the Marquis's husband was not obliged to bend the knee to him. Jackson realized that he needed to find a way to leave the capital, since there were too many influential people who were getting in his way. After these thoughts, the fourth prince was ready to say something to Jackson. However, the prince explained that Jackson misunderstood him. He was not looking for the Marquis, but him. As it turned out, the prince wanted Jackson to take him to the 100 Flowers Pavilion. In parting, the prince asked Daniel not to worry about the master. The carriage slowly moved away, carrying Jackson and the prince towards the 100 Flowers Pavilion. For Jackson, the question of what the prince wanted from him became terribly interesting. The prince asked what issue Jackson wanted to meet with him about, or whether it was about those divine objects. The fourth prince felt that the matter of divine items had already been raised by the minister, and their goals seemed to be the same. The prince introduced himself a little more brashly than Jackson did. At that moment, Jackson realized that the prince was going to speak directly and frankly. Jackson stated that all these divine objects belonged to his family. The prince stated that he was not interested in the origin of these items. He just wanted to talk to Jackson and invited them to become friends. Jackson could not understand what this meant, but it seems that the prince is seeking the support of the Marquis. The prince, as the heir of the family, realized that if he decided to turn to the Marquis for support, then his future could turn out to be extremely unreliable. He then took something out of his bag and stated that it was a gift for Jackson. Jackson, waiting impatiently, was full of anticipation of something majestic. Jackson apparently misunderstood and replied that although he was heading to the pavilion, he was still too young for that. The prince could not understand how the foundation pill was related to the 100 Flowers Pavilion since it was not poison. The prince explained that this pill is an unusual elixir intended for those who seek to strengthen their foundations, their principles and values. The prince was then informed that they had arrived at the 100 Flowers Pavilion. Jackson, whose martial arts skills were far from masterful, did not live up to expectations. He is unaware of subtleties such as the foundation pill, leaving him completely in the dark regarding such things. He asked if the guy knew about martial arts skills. Then the heir, the prince himself, began to demonstrate something to Jackson. The main character was ready to see what the prince had in store for him. Then, with a sparkling bright blue glow in his hands, the prince swung at the nearby statue, and, oddly enough, after a moment it mysteriously moved several meters to the side. Then he asked Jackson to try to do the same as him. Unfortunately, the guy didn't succeed, and it took several attempts. Hardening the body and cleansing the bones is what Jackson will need. Unless, of course, there really are 4 levels of martial arts in this world: body tempering, bone refining, cultivation, and perhaps martial saint. Each level has 3 layers that characterize the features and depth of this stage. By taking the pill, he could instantly advance to the first layer of body tempering, gaining an advantage in his combat development. This also implied that he would be able to influence the stone lion statue, moving it with the power of his enhanced body. Jackson was amazed and could not believe such an incredible gift. He concluded by noting that Jackson really stands out and is a more interesting subject than the others. The House of 100 Flowers was truly magnificently built, but unfortunately, all the flowers were taken away by the minister. Jackson felt a little perplexed when he saw this in front of him. The crown prince advised him not to be upset, promising to bring everything he needed. The prince assured that it would be easy and without problems to reach an agreement with the minister. Jackson could hardly believe these words, but accepted them gratefully. At this moment, Alice appeared, who noted that the prince should not be bothered by the problems of her husband. She promised to help him return not only the flowers, but also the healing root. He was surprised by his wife's unexpected behavior. At the same time, she argued that no one in the capital would bully him. He asked if she would be angry with him for visiting the brothel. She asked why he could not come here, since all the princes and courtiers often visited such places. He was surprised because she didn't care what he did. Alice suggested that they could have a drink and have fun, but warned that if anyone dared to stay overnight with her husband, she would destroy everyone. The girls immediately agreed to Alice's terms. Of course, Jackson still couldn't believe what was happening around him. She advised him to come early in the evening, promising to prepare dinner. He could not understand what happened to his wife, because before she had not shown such attention to him. He was looking forward to what the marquise would look like after the wedding, but today was truly unexpected. The girls can continue their lives as before, because in a couple of days the House of 100 Flowers will open its doors again. However, now it is no longer a brothel, but a place where the House of 100 Flowers sells a variety of goods. As it turned out, someone suddenly broke into the minister's presidential yard. He was informed that the hired mercenaries turned out to be much more expensive than the 100 Flowers building itself. At that moment, a man turned to him. As it turned out, it was the Minister of the Interior, who announced that the whole capital now knew that he had lost the building to the husband of the Marquis, who was considered a failure before the auction. The guy couldn't believe what was happening and was scared. By trying to make someone the object of ridicule, he ended up becoming the object of laughter for those around him. He has no problem following the prince, but he has been told in the future to only do as he is told and to refrain from taking any extra steps. Alice is not nearly as simple as he assumes, and their family is not something they can easily destroy. Although she is somewhat younger than him, thanks to the reputation of several generations of her family, she has proven to be much stronger. He felt bewildered, unable to comprehend that he was giving her the authority to do such behavior. Jackson explained to the worker what needed to be done, but was not told that they would complete the task in 3 days. Jackson politely asked if the prince had left. He had already promised to take care of him, so once the task was completed, he planned to send him back to the marquise. At this time, the two men decided that they should deal with the swordsman first. Several seconds passed before they decided to rush out to fight the man. Apparently they were overly confident in their ability to defeat him, but at that moment they realized that something was not going according to their plan. As it turned out, after a few seconds this man was literally standing on their heads. They warned him not to make fun of them, otherwise he would be punished. When they were sure that he had disappeared, it turned out that he was only behind them. He realized that he didn't even need to draw his sword and that he could easily deal with them. After a split second, he simply started attacking them from behind. He had no choice but to stand idle and watch it all. Then he pressed them against the wall, making his plan come true. Jackson was interested in the noise that was heard on the street. When they came out, they discovered that no one was there anymore, because the man had managed to deal with everyone. The two men could not comprehend how their carefully planned plan had failed so easily. As it turned out, Alice actually prepared dinner for him. He couldn't care about food. He needed to find a way to distance himself from it. Upon entering the house, Jackson announced that he had returned. The girl said that the dishes she served were prepared by her personally for him. He couldn't figure out what kind of outfit the girl was wearing. She rarely has time to wear such clothes, as she is constantly busy with business and is on the move. She would try to look more lively and at least not bring the family routine into the house. Now that she and he were married, they should spend their dinners together. Jackson expressed his intention to talk about the divorce. Alice, in turn, noted that she prepared this soup with her own hands. He announced that he did not want to divorce her because of a misunderstanding, but rather because he already has someone he likes. Of course, Alice was furious and said that they had enough to eat, and he could help himself to the soup that she had prepared with her own hands. He was sorry, but he simply told her the truth. The fourth prince's guard couldn't understand why he thought so highly of Jackson that he even gave him a reason. He admitted that their family was indeed on the verge of collapse, but added, however, he knew Jackson had the potential to change the course of events and turn things around for the better for their family. Even so, the foundation pill was too expensive. There are only a few craftsmen in the world who can create such pills, and only 2 such pills can be produced per year. If he gives a period to a person from their family, then he can win his loyalty, and he will have an ally within that family. However, to truly consider Jackson as a friend is a person who completely ignores his high status and maintains a friendly relationship with him. Since he became a prince, he had not had such a good relationship with any man. He has always liked being in silence and hates following rules. If it weren't for his family responsibilities to his mother, he would probably prefer to avoid participating in the chaos of the capital. The man asked if the fourth prince was going to fight for the throne. He decided to find out who told him this information. When Jackson was asked why he hadn't eaten, he replied that he simply had no appetite. He should rest as the Marchioness plans to stay at the military camp today. He was also advised to give him 2 baskets of herbs to save him the trouble of searching for them himself. As it turned out, the order to collect the herbs was given by the marquise. She also instructed him to take some kind of box. Jackson couldn't even imagine what might be in that box. The Marchioness was afraid that she would lose the argument, so she sold her family's property to raise 100,000. He can't blame Alice for trusting her. The man once again confirmed that the marquise was truly devoted to him. He said that the man took these 100,000 and then took away all the family property, which the marquise tried to sell. Now the man said that if this is not enough, then let them tell him. And he also informed that he would be out of town and it was unknown when he would return, so it was best that no one be allowed near him. Soon His Majesty will return, and soon the return of the Marchioness will begin. Jackson remembered and asked not to be reminded. Now he is not sure if he can return to his world, but in any case, he needs to try to sleep. Jackson woke up to someone dialing his number this morning. As it turned out, Alexander called and said that they had not been in touch for a long time. Jackson immediately asked how much time had passed. As it turned out, a day passed, and the guy immediately asked if he could come to Jackson. Jackson was at a hotel near the university and said he would be there soon. 1 day in that world is equal to half a day here. This time 2 days there means 1 day here. For some reason, time flows differently in the 2 worlds, and his body experiences twice the load. At this rate, he will begin to age much earlier. Jackson remembered the foundation pill he had been given. Apparently, the consequences were not the best, because he ended up in the hospital. She came with a bouquet of fresh flowers and a heartfelt smile, trying to cheer him up after his bad experience with the foundation pill. And it was at this moment that he began to come to his senses. The girl gently woke him up, begging him to wake up under the light of the moon. He was silent, but his eyes flickered with silent requests to tell her something important. It was completely incomprehensible to him why he was in the hospital, and it did not give him peace. It turned out that he fell in the hotel room, finding himself covered in blood. Remembering that he had taken the pill, he tried to unravel the mystery of his condition in the fog of memory. After this, strange things began to happen, and then he lost consciousness, as if falling into a mysterious dream. The doctor asked the girl not to worry about the guy, assuring that they were doing everything possible to restore him. According to the examination report, not only is everything fine for Mr. Jackson, but, on the contrary, his body is in better condition than it was before. The blood stains in the hotel were also analyzed, and it turned out that it was not blood, but impurities in the body. Such a phenomenon was rare and mysterious in medicine. In other words, the health of her internal organs has improved significantly. Jackson feels a flow passing through his body. Never before has his body been so relaxed and comfortable. Then the girl immediately hugged the guy, as if trying to convey to him her care and joy from the recovery. At that moment, Michael approached his father. Lately he has been letting him down a lot. Michael immediately took over the conversation about Jackson. The father recalled that his task was to go and marry the girl so that the company would remain in their hands. Michael, hearing these words, did not remember what he answered. His father gave him one last chance. If he failed, he would simply go to study abroad. Will he leave this place, and it will become impossible to claim the inheritance? Having said that was all, the father made it clear to his son that he could go. Without further argument, Michael, of course, obeyed his father, and Dad agreed with his decision. It goes without saying that there was anger smoldering in his soul towards Jackson. The previous time they got sick, Mother Nature didn't show herself very favorably. Despite past failures, Jackson does not blame Grace's mother, who decided to find a way to change her attitude towards himself. Grace developed a fear of possible conflicts with her mother. She handed Alexander 2 baskets of herbs and the box that he had brought. Expressing admiration, he noted her thoughtfulness and was ready to share information about what this mysterious thing was. However, her words are not intended to force him to confess, rather, she is simply trying to calm him down. At this time, his mother intervened in Michael's family scene and asked the man if he was putting too much pressure on his son. After answering, he explained that their family stood out, and today they are stronger than others due to the strict selection of heirs. She wondered if this factor was the reason for the large number of his marital offspring. It didn't matter to him whether any of his descendants were illegitimate or not, the main thing was that he was strong. In conclusion, she stated that marrying him was some kind of punishment. The man did not understand a little about the punishment and asked again about it. He explained that by punishment he meant a situation where she enjoys fame and fortune and everyone respects her as the mistress of their family. After these words, the woman silently left the office without uttering a word. The man also remained silent and did not say anything. It turned out that Michael was standing nearby, very nervous. Considering his father's philosophy to be correct, Michael was convinced that he was not destined to fail. He decided to become the heir, and he was ready to marry her at any cost. Having turned to his mother for help, he was faced with the fact that she could not intervene, since this could cause discord with his brother. It was at that moment that a guy came up from behind and asked his mother to help him. Michael turned around and already anticipated who was behind him. It goes without saying that it was his brother who was just talked about. The eldest son of the family came up and told his mother to just help him and everything would be fine. Michael asked if he really minded. It turned out that he said all this with the goal of making Michael realize his inadequacy and completely destroy his reputation. After that, they just went their separate ways, and the older brother chuckled. Even in the men's dormitory, Jackson continued to be surprised by the effect of that pill. It seemed like a long time had passed since he left the hospital, and he decided to try one jump. After the pill worked, he easily jumped over a dozen steps. Needless to say, it was an incredible sight. One of the guys even asked if Jackson wanted to join a sports club, to which he replied in the negative. He couldn't figure out if it was real, and the ground started because of this pill. Entering the room, he informed Alexander that he had returned. The guy said that the two of them went to deal with the herbs that he brought. Grace approached him with an offer to discuss opening a company. Jackson asked if he had everything planned yet. Thanks to herbal sales and her sister's support, the plan to start the company went smoothly. Alexander provided details of the plans he had developed. Jackson said he has complete confidence in him. However, at this point, Alexander announced that he could no longer work with him. Jackson couldn't understand what was going on with Alexander and asked if he was angry. Deploying a company to start a business is a very serious matter, first of all, having a significant impact on their future. Jackson was easily shocked after this conversation. Having the opportunity to travel between worlds, money became something secondary, and he continued to live as before. Alexander thought of every detail of the company, while Jackson, instead, did nothing. As it turned out, Alexander went to the playground to just sit and think. He just looked at the sky and thought at this time. Just at this time, Grace's friend appeared. She couldn't understand why this straightforward guy was standing alone and looking into the distance. It goes without saying that she immediately began to evaluate her appearance. She was a little surprised why she suddenly needed to pay attention to her appearance today, and couldn't understand what was going on. The girl immediately asked why he wasn't with Jackson today. He asked if she had come here, because she saw him. The guy just gently took her hand and pulled her towards him. Needless to say, she couldn't understand what was going on here. Alexander said that he was in a bad mood today and asked if they could talk. He replied that he was ready to talk, because everyone else was busy. It goes without saying that these words did not particularly please the girl. Moreover, she added that she doesn't mind spending time with him. The girl didn't even know how to react to his words. After a couple of seconds, she finally asked what happened. He started talking about how lately he felt like Jackson had become distant and he didn't understand what was going on. The girl could not understand why he and his emotions were so strongly attached to Jackson. Even at this moment, Alexander insisted on his attitude towards Jackson. Alexander argued that he has obligations, he is able to find an approach in difficult situations, see a problem clearly and find a solution. He also cited his philosophy regarding grace, believing that it is better to refuse someone you like than to make a promise that impossible to perform. However, the girl still couldn't understand why the guy was feeling sad about Jackson. He tried to help him get his business started, but it may have been too hasty. Now he has a chance to get on the same level with Grace's company and maintain a relationship with her without problems. And she asked if he knew how big Grace's company was. This is impressive information. The entire company's market capitalization of $13 billion indicates its significant influence in the market. With its diverse business including real estate, jewelry, herbs and shopping malls, Grace has a major position in various industries. The girl assumed that he probably had a fever. He continued to claim that he was fine and had no fever. He continued by saying that people are capable of amazing things and can overcome any challenge. Moreover, a miracle could happen to Jackson. The main character carefully looked around the room, trying to restore reality after strange dreams. He realized that 2 days had passed, and the sense of time had become somehow strange. He realized that he had not been able to move to another world for 2 days, which meant that the frequency of the transition was changing, and he wondered how he could take something from that world if he went there only once a year. At that moment Alexander came in and asked if he was awake. He didn't call him because he was afraid that he would wake up. Jackson apologized and said that he had been too frivolous and should not have blamed everything on him. It turned out that the main character invested a lot of time in studying the materials, reading them not once, but 3 times. Indeed, Alexander is right, because he is betting on his plans for the future and must reflect on what will happen next. Then he decided to take a break from university in order to fully concentrate on his plans and their implementation. Needless to say, Jackson was against this decision. He asked not to worry about him, claiming that the only reason for entering the university was the opportunity to get a good job. If he decides to take a year off, it may be a good idea, and if everything works out then great, but if plans don't pan out he may have to go back to school. Jackson suggested we do it together. Alexander replied that this was not necessary, he had his own affairs, and let Jackson look after his own affairs, and he would take over the company. He was slightly surprised, because Alexander really decided to help him. Jackson noted that the plan included a provision for them to handle the herb processing themselves in the future. If this happens, the partnership with the senior-junior will have to end. Alexander said that he had made a good point and that it might be better not to cooperate with them. The profit from the cooperation turned out to be too small, and for the future development of the company it will be necessary to independently engage in grass processing. It is only a matter of time before they stop collaborating with current partners. By clarifying this in advance, it is easier to avoid conflicts later. The family villa of the Grace family impressed with its luxurious and status appearance. Michael, accompanied by his mother, came to the woman to spend time together. Needless to say, the mother and girl were happy to see them. The woman apologized for calling Michael's mother a madam. They sat down in the comfortable living room of the villa, and the conversation became free and friendly. Michael asked if Grace's grandfather recognized him as his heir, and if the woman herself was worried about this. She replied that not at all, because it was quite possible that one day the old man would have a new heir. Michael's mom had a good laugh about this. Her sister misunderstood her and she laughed because her daughter was so young and just needed help. He gratefully accepted the drink, and the conversation continued in an atmosphere of comfort and cordiality. The woman asked if Michael's mother really gave all her resources to her son. However, she is afraid that Michael will not be able to compete with his brother, so she also expressed her willingness to help him. It turned out that the woman was here because of her brother. She said that her sister is incredibly smart, and that they have been friends since childhood, and they came here to discuss the engagement ceremony. Michael said that he had already thought through everything that would happen after the wedding. He shared his plans on how he was going to develop the business and participate in family affairs, striving for the well-being and happiness of his future family. Grace's mother asked if this was true. Michael said that he has real feelings for her daughter, she needs him too. This is a time when their families need each other and they see their children growing up, so there is no need to worry. She began to understand the meaning of what was said and felt confident that uniting families brought support and security. Besides, she was fascinated by Michael at first sight. But Grace thinks only of Jackson, and her daughter resists Michael's engagement proposal. Grandpa takes care of her, so she can't force her. He assured her that everything would be fine and they would find a way to resolve the situation. As long as both families agree, he can convince her to accept the offer. He stated that he would not allow any harm to come to her daughter and was willing to stand up for her well-being even if he had to suffer. Instead, he decides to use Jackson. Naturally, the woman was curious to know what Michael was up to. Michael sees that Grace's weak point is Jackson, and if he can convince her to marry him, then everything will be fine. He only asked not to be accused of aggressiveness. She planned to use the situation to her advantage to teach Jackson respect and obedience. At this moment, in the men's dormitory, two brothers had just read the documents about the company. Jackson apologized for talking about the plan since the two of them arrived. If he processes the herbs himself, he will not supply herbs to them for processing in the future. But they weren't worried about it at all and asked him to calm down. Jackson was surprised by this turn of events. Alexander smiled and lowered his eyes because he understood that everything would be fine. At this time, in the Marquise's house, Alice was simply sitting and thinking about something. First, the girl's injury on the way home. Then she remembered how Jackson brought her favorite wine. Then how he tried to find a way to help her raise money for her army. And also about the lanterns at the auction. Daniel reported that Jackson was not in his room. Alice asked herself what the hell he was doing because she couldn't understand his intentions. Jackson couldn't believe it. Yesterday they were just discussing their plans, and today the company had already found them in the office. Thanks to Grace, it was possible to rent an office with such speed and compliance with all formalities. Alexander handed the keys to Jackson, establishing a connection and trust between them. The older sister rented 2 apartments for them near the university. Jackson inquiringly asked if he had time to share information about his current activities and affairs. He explained that only 2 idiots in the dorm could believe that his herb was found in the mountains. Alexander asked him not to reveal the content of fairy tales about herbs from the mountains. Jackson's main goal was to create his own company and be with Grace. Alexander had his goal to make their company as big as Grace's. Jackson expressed gratitude to him for his efforts. At this time, in the women's dormitory, someone was humming a song cheerfully. As it turned out, it was Grace who happily announced that the drying of the clothes was completed. This time Elizabeth noticed that she was seeing her for the first time on the balcony. She couldn't understand why her friend's boyfriend was suddenly causing concern. Elizabeth explained that he was not bothering her, she just asked a question. Grace asked if she really wanted to ask Alexander a question. The girl said that he went to help Jackson open his own business. Elizabeth only found out today that he was taking a break. It so happens that they are not doing internship this semester. She explained that, while still a student, she could not accept work under the leadership of Alexander. Grace has a stake in their company and has offered her the opportunity to become the vice president in charge of human resources and recruiting. She replied that in that case she could contribute to their affairs. In the end, Jackson did make it to his apartment. He has finally finished all his work and can now get to work. A few seconds later he returned and began searching for information on the internet. And now, after a few hours, he has finally printed out all the necessary materials, which he hopes will provide him with support and assistance in the new world where he is heading. He is not sure whether he will have to go to another world today, but fatigue has taken over him, and he really wants to sleep. Plus his bed was surprisingly comfortable. Indeed, Jackson is back, and it's good that he prepared in advance. It was at this moment that Daniel came to him, who was glad that he had finally returned. Tomorrow there is a festive dinner, and, fortunately, the main character managed to prepare for this event. He would also like to clarify with him why, after winning the battle so long ago, they decided to have a celebration only now. Due to the intensive cultivation of his empire and some delays, everything happened late. The emperor cultivates, and, strangely, not a single official of the dynasty expressed protest. Daniel will tell you more about this later, but now he has to try on his outfit for tomorrow's dinner. Jackson was slightly surprised, but still agreed, and in a moment he was already in his outfit. However, Daniel reported that this was not the right outfit, as it was essentially a slave's clothing. Pointing his finger at the bed, he showed that his real outfit was there. Daniel asked what kind of papers the guy had. Alexander cannot simply leave the building unattended, because this is exactly the business that he won and is going to develop. Daniel asked if the gentleman would sell rare treasures. The main character explained that this is not about that. We are talking about small business. He emphasized that his plan is not focused on creating a business for a narrow circle, but on creating a real business for a mass audience. The main character asked what would happen to the property that he asked to buy. The man could have bought 5 of the 10 stores, but in the end the Marquis sold them all cheap, making it impossible to buy the remaining stores. Jackson realized that he needed to start his own business. A custom painting of a beautiful woman is available for just $20. Jackson was confident that this idea would bring him a lot of profit. Daniel noted that the idea is cool, but added that there are already those who are doing something similar. He realized that there was already a chamber of commerce that had come up with the idea, recognizing that competition already existed in the field. The protagonist realized that this chamber of commerce is not simple, which may affect the complexity of the competition and require more careful planning and strategy. The main character was informed that young Mr. Oscar wants to meet him. If they are in the same business, it is better for him not to date this person. But Jackson did not agree with this, but asked to be invited to the main hall. The Marquise's army training ground is a place where military units under the command of the Marquise train. Alice was training fruitfully and diligently at this moment. With her arrow, she hit the bullseye of the target, demonstrating high accuracy and skill in handling a bow. Everyone present really appreciated her skills in horse riding and shooting. Then Alice was ready to shoot the second arrow, and to the surprise of everyone, it hit exactly the same place as the first arrow. Of course, everyone present thought it was an amazing performance. The second arrow simply smashed the first. Everyone chanted that the Marquise was magnificent. The Chamber of Commerce asked the man to hand over the dragon halberd. Alice could not understand what the Chamber of Commerce was up to, causing her bewilderment and a desire to understand the situation. The young master said that their previous failure to provide assistance was due to the current situation. Now he expresses his desire to do business with Mr. Jackson, and as a sign of gratitude he sends her a dragon halberd. They asked when the Marquise would allow them to meet Jackson. She promised to bring him to their camp someday, and now she returns home, and he can continue his training. In the luxurious mansion of the Marquise, waiting for Jackson, Oscar was already in the house. Jackson, deciding not to waste time, immediately gets to the point and, turning to Oscar, asks if he has come for the photo paper. Now, having specified that the paper that will be used for the desired item is called photographic paper, Oscar gains new knowledge in his arsenal. The main character decides not to hide his true intentions. He intended to start his own business in the field of paintings. However, being here, he realizes that this, it seems, will not succeed. Oscar, directly addressing Jackson, asks if he is interested in mutually beneficial cooperation. Assuming that he decides to take up this business in the capital, Jackson expresses his willingness to represent photographic paper outside its borders, receiving 40% of the total price of the painting. Of course, he was surprised by the 40% offer. The main character begs him not to complicate the situation, because they are not on the market, and offers to maintain mutual understanding within the framework of their agreement. They were wondering how many divine items and photo papers he could place in the Chamber of Commerce. Jackson suggests stocking the Chamber of Commerce with 30 cameras and 30,000 sheets of photo paper to start. Oscar, suddenly at a dead end, does not find an answer at the moment. Even Daniel, stunned, could not believe that he could provide such a quantity of goods. He asks the man to bring several necessary items, revealing the details of their future collaboration. The camera, that divine object that can instantly capture a moment on canvas, becomes a key tool for creating paintings. The man brings with him enough materials to create 200 portraits and promises to deliver the rest as needed. Oscar thanks him and expresses hope for a long-term and strong cooperation between them. If there is anything else he would like to say to Mr. Jackson. He learned that the prince had expressed his intention to unite with him. His sister, a young woman aged 28, has skills in playing the piano, chess, and is also interested in calligraphy and painting. Jackson thought she was a very sweet girl, admiring her talents and kindness. In addition, it was difficult for him to believe that she was already 28, because she looked like a 16-year-old girl. He expressed his gratitude, saying that he really appreciated Oscar's kindness. Despite her kindness and attractiveness, he reminded her that he was only 16 years old and had no plans to get married yet. Surprised, Oscar asked if he liked older girls. In addition, the Marquise will never agree to a divorce. Currently, young Master Jackson does not have external support. However, if they join the Chamber of Commerce, the situation may change. At the most opportune moment, Alice joined them. She expressed interest and wanted to know what young Mr. Oscar's plans were and what upcoming activities he was going to undertake. He greeted the Marquise politely. Despite his friendliness, the Marquise had no desire to answer. Her gaze remained restrained and imperturbable. She decided to repeat her question, wondering what exactly the Chamber of Commerce's plans and intentions were. Considering the current situation of her home, it was fair to say whether it was really a good idea to stick with Mr. Jackson. She could not understand how he dared to speak like that, and asked if he was already bored with life. He immediately apologized for his words and asked for forgiveness for any possible misunderstanding. He had heard that the Iron Horsemen of the Red Army were considered invincible, but noticed that they were short of horses and offered his assistance in this matter. Alice replied that horses with dragon blood were difficult to find and she already had 30,000 riders under her command. Then she asked how many horses he could provide her with. Oscar was afraid that at the moment it would be difficult for him to afford to provide such a large number of horses. However, considering that he had just successfully negotiated a great deal with Alice's husband, financial matters were not a problem for him. He assured that he would provide 30,000 dragon blood horses for the Northern Army within 3 years. Jackson asked Oscar if he planned to exchange 40% of his proceeds for horses. She suggested that he provide her with 100 horses, and in exchange she promised to forgive him for what he had said earlier. She agreed that the horses would be delivered to the northern camp of the city within 3 days. Jackson couldn't understand what Alyssa just did. After consulting with him, Alice asked for another 300,000 horses with dragon blood. She assured that she would also find a way to return the money to him for the horses provided. Alice added that if he decided to take the second year hostage, the chambers of commerce would become his property. Jackson couldn't understand what Oscar meant by his words at the moment. He asked if she had heard from someone that her qualities were more consistent with life in the field than in the capital. The girl was interested and wanted clarification of what exactly this meant. He just thought that maybe everything that happened today was planned by him in advance. The horseman leading Oscar noticed that the Marquise was aware of her unreasonableness, and could not understand why Oscar was trying to influence her in his favor. They used 40% of the profits they agreed on with Oscar in exchange for horses, and 30,000 horses with dragon blood is a significant force. After such a move, the army will be even more powerful than before. The Oscar family will undoubtedly have to reckon with the imperial court, military requirements will become even more stringent, and the army will increasingly depend on the support of the Oscar family, which will be provided by their chambers of commerce. The writer asked why he had not paid attention to their family before. Oscar feels that all these changes are happening thanks to the appearance of young Master Jackson, and confidently foresees that thanks to this their family will blossom and become one of the best. He could not understand how the main character was so talented as to cause such changes in the family. Oscar was afraid that in the future the main character would open their eyes even more to new opportunities and changes. Although it was great that 3 generations of the family had served the faith and shed blood on the battlefield, but without Mr. Jackson, the family might have faced decline. He was confident that young Mr. Oscar would restore justice. However, the guy simply laughed at these words, expressing his disbelief in the possibility of justice being restored in such circumstances. On a final note, the writer only asked if he thought their family was great. At this time, in the prince's house, he was simply sitting and looking at something, immersed in his thoughts. In this position, His Highness looks like an ordinary city boy, carried away by his thoughts and observations. Hundreds of dragon blood horses were sent to Alice's family's military camp. Such military assistance may promote the Chamber of Commerce's close relationship with their family in the future. Interestingly, their families have great power and the Chamber of Commerce abounds in wealth. These two families that were destined to face decline have now joined forces. The more one refuses to cooperate, the more uneasy the majesty becomes. The prince was convinced that if the emperor had felt fear, the two families would have already been destroyed. It seems that he underestimated the young master. This move will not only bring profit, but also ensure the protection of the family. The actions of Oscar and Jackson will lead to a real revolution in the capital. The man was confused, as it was difficult for him to make out the meaning of what was said. The prince drinks tea, Alice watches, but the struggle for the throne is three-way, with mutual costs and balances. Forces that can upset their balance, he has no chance to cope with it. Now the man fully realized the situation and understood what forces stood against each other in the struggle for power and influence. But the prince was looking forward to tomorrow's holiday, while all the forces of struggle and influence converged in a complex game of political intrigue and alliances. At the Marquise's house, Jackson asked whether he should go tomorrow. Initially, he had to carry out some business, but then a letter arrived from the emperor, saying that he wanted to meet with him, and not only with him. Over the past few days, the most active individuals have been taking turns visiting Marquis Jackson's house. Exhausted, he was so exhausted that he could neither talk to those who came nor be in a state of meaningful conversation. If he feels unwell, he should simply refrain from visiting and not show up. He had an urgent need to discuss important issues with Alice, and also to form a group of competent people to effectively manage and develop the business. He trusts the soldiers in the house, but he will have to wait patiently for his grandfather to return to make a decision. He noted that the soldiers presented themselves in a somewhat unusual uniform. In addition, there are many soldiers in the army who are disabled or injured during their service. While he deplored the fact that the Northern Army was subject to considerable mistrust, he also regretted that the conditions for providing for wounded soldiers in its charge remain significantly less favorable compared with other armies. Military personnel are underpaid, making them financially insufficient to support their families, and, moreover, they face difficulty finding employment as they are often not hired, a problem that becomes even more acute for disabled soldiers. Jackson couldn't even find the words to respond to her regrets and worries. He expressed the opinion that he was not trustworthy and did not live up to expectations. Alice was curious about what idea or suggestion could be offered to Jackson in this situation. The main character asked to provide him with this information. Jackson announced that he was willing to pay double the rewards. Whether they are disabled, elderly or disempowered, Jackson emphasized the need to provide support so they can earn a living if they wish and get the help they need. She realized that Jackson was busy with his business, and she wanted to come and support him, understanding how busy he was. Besides, she missed him a lot. She stood up to open the door, and a man walked into the room, standing in the shadows with a mysterious expression on his face. She finally saw her mother, and the girl seems to be choosing not to answer her mother's calls for Jackson's sake. The girl noted that they all needed to calm down a little, remembering a past incident when she herself had gone too far. The mother admitted that she made a mistake last time when setting the price, and admitted that her daughter has her own opinion, which should be respected. She was worried that Jackson might deceive her, but in her mother's eyes she was still a child. The girl asked the woman to give Jackson some time, claiming that he would definitely prove himself. Of course, she didn't believe her words and simply remained silent. She clarified that the girl's grandfather was planning a family dinner on Friday evening. She had to appear before her grandfather, because after all, she was the heir to the family property. She reminded her of the words her own grandfather had spoken, advising her to focus on her studies and not necessarily attend the family dinner. However, her mother begged her to attend the dinner for her grandfather's sake, especially since many of their friends would be there. She made a promise to her mother that she would definitely show up for dinner. At the same time, the Marquise is at home. Jackson was ready to share some information with Alice. They still had not formalized their union, but their closeness was expressed by the fact that they continued to sleep together, emphasizing their intimate connection. Alice noted that this was not the first time they had shared the same bed. She could not understand why he suddenly showed such selectivity and disgust. She was not going to ask him about the origin of these things and the reasons for his disappearance. She only asked him not to hide it from his family and not to lie. He promised her to do everything possible to help the family, but at the same time expressed a desire to clarify some issues for her. Before he came here, he had a girlfriend that he liked. She immediately stood up, showing readiness to do something. She seemed about to sit on the guy, taking the top position. The main character could not understand what she was going to do. Their lips met in a tender kiss that filled the air with instant passion and surprise. There was an awkward pause between them, both of them feeling unexpected tension after the kiss. She said that this kiss was her answer, and she was able to tolerate that he might like others, even allowing him to lead a kind of double life. It was she who assured him that he was the only one for her, and divorce was not an option. If he ever talks about breaking up again, she'll make him dinner. Jackson Bush coughed with this answer. He responded by saying that if she killed him, she herself would suffer as a result of it. Alice's mood simply fell, and she did not want to continue this conversation. The second morning came, bringing with it a mysterious silence, a veil obscuring everything around. Alice rose at dawn, ready for her morning workout. Inviting her husband to her place, the girl smiled. Last night, she noticed that his breathing had become long and prolonged, indicating that he had already entered the initial stage of hardening his body. Having said that the fourth prince gave him a pill, he described the moment when this mysterious potion was in his hands, the key to something unknown, hidden behind the door of adventure. Alice assured him that everything was fine, and if after that he decided to return the pill, she would hand it over to him with a smile. Although it sounds good, but he is unable to understand it. There is an invisible gap between them. He is the only prince to return to the capital after the uprising. 10 years ago, his grandfather rebelled, and his mother died in the palace. Being a blood relative of the emperor, he was saved from death, but sent to remote, cold places. Fate placed heavy trials on his shoulders. And so, for some unknown reason, several years ago he was returned to the capital and made a prince. Other princes were naturally afraid of him, but as time passed since his return, he continued to commit acts that did not correspond to generally accepted norms for a prince. However, during some investigation, it became clear that he was not influenced by wicked officials, did not have significant influence and did not maintain relationships with influential individuals. Jackson could not understand for what purpose he received that mysterious pill from him. Taking Jackson's hand, Alice said that she would not let anyone hurt him. He asked why she was touching him. She expressed a desire to examine his muscles and bones as he took that mysterious pill that supposedly created the basis for his physical strength and durability. The girl was amazed by the sight of his body. He asked if it was possible that he was one of the few martial arts geniuses. His statements sounded overly confident, but it was impossible not to notice that he had a very attractive physique. Despite his attractive physique, it was too early for him to take part in combat operations. First he needed to master useful skills that could save lives. I was curious how he planned to conduct his training. She fills him with truth and the energy of the flame, and with her he will hone his fighting skills in the fire song. She fears that it will take him several years to practice his true energy. This is just a channel of his true energy, but she is sure that it will not harm her. Jackson noticed that it was surprising and arousing feeling. He felt something unusual that aroused interest and excitement in him. Moreover, his body became more and more hot and ardent, the inner flame flaring up with every moment. Alice was almost finished, her class was nearing the end, and there was a tension in the air, like after completing an important stage in the creative process. And now Jackson can stand up, freed from the flames of mystery and energy that enveloped him during the lesson. Just at that moment he opened his eyes, awakening from an immersion in an inner world full of secrets and possibilities. He asked if this was true energy, seeking to unravel the mystery of what had just happened during his training. The foundation pill saved him a lot of time. Now he can try to break this stone slab. The internal energy and strength he has mastered is ready to be revealed in the real test. He was surprised, because the slab turned out to be very thick. To experience this true energy, he had to gather it within himself, strengthening his body, and then release it outward, preparing to attack the enemy. When Jackson took all the instructions carefully, he swung his hand, preparing to deliver his unique blow. Another moment, and he, a master of his craft, smashed this slab in front of him with his own blow, as if releasing the full power of his true energy, which became the source of his triumph. He couldn't believe his eyes. He actually broke that slab with one blow. It was impressive, but he still had a lot of training to achieve even greater results, each success becoming an impetus for deeper improvement. Everyone said that her martial arts skills were among the top 3 in the world, and he became curious to know what exactly she could demonstrate in this area. She couldn't find the words to describe it, so she decided to demonstrate her skills with actions. Using her power, she lifted the stones into the air, magically controlling the matter around her. Jackson was left in shock by this display of power, his admiration for Alice's incredible skills turning into complete amazement. This flow of true energy proved to be extremely powerful and overwhelming, a magic that carried with it indescribable power and inner wisdom. She did not train specifically, all her skills were the result of many battles in battle. Each of her experiences in battle was imprinted on her skills. In addition, the stones simply split. Under the influence of her true energy, they could not resist the power of her actions. She was already ranked among the top 3 in the world, and her skill should be the most powerful in this realm, her unique abilities putting her beyond competition. After a few seconds, the stones simply crumbled into dust. She freed them from their previous form with the power of her art. Alice said it was time for them to start eating. He realized that it was better not to enter into a conversation about divorce without knowing her true strength, foreseeing that this question could open up new dimensions of her power. One of the princes went on a long journey, while he, as the heir to the throne, was supposed to carefully monitor the welfare of the country. If he were too kind to the war queen located on the border, it would probably cause discontent and suspicion from others. It's all because of Alice's family who refused to submit to him. In this difficult relationship, the strength and pride of each side is revealed. At that moment, someone walked in on them, breaking that moment of intimacy and bringing a sudden interruption into their conversation. It was Oscar who said that Alice's family was not to blame. The prince was glad to have him back. Oscar's return brought relief and, perhaps, new perspectives in a difficult relationship. Before leaving, he said that if the family could not be conquered, then they could not be considered suitable as mice, because an army without the support of families was just scattered sand. He is still young, and the prince must take over their family. He asked him to think again. At this time, the emperor's room reported that the Alice family had won a great victory over the northern barbarians, and proposed to reward them with the title of prince. He stated that the second man simply doesn't care about them. 3 generations of the family have protected their mountains and rivers, and they are still putting pressure on the enemy. Everything was fine, but when it came to the marquis's reward, the 2 of them had already entered into an argument. The emperor declared that both of them were wrong, seeing the shortcomings of both sides in their dispute and seeking to find a compromise solution. He heard that Alice and her husband loved each other very much, and that Alice's husband had excellent business skills, so let them, as a reward, offer the marquise's husband to accept a position in the Ministry of Finance. The man said that he was very wise. Now that the matter of remunerating the family has been resolved, the 2 of them can leave. At this time, someone else turned to the emperor, suddenly interrupting their conversation and demanding attention. It was a certain James, who said that the family was really on the island of the knife, and even with great military successes, its decline was inevitable. He asked if he knew which of them really made every effort for the good of the family. The prime minister does not care about his family. His efforts and attention are aimed at the benefit of the people. He is pleased with James's progress on this journey. Your High Majesty was informed that tomorrow Alice's army would have a holiday. As it turned out, this was reported by the war queen of the South Country. When Jackson read the decree of the emperor himself, he was pleasantly surprised. He asked why the emperor suddenly appointed him Minister of the Interior. Well, once he raises the money for the army, he will be involved in peace negotiations between the two countries and lead the relief efforts. The Minister of Internal Affairs is a minor official, but if he has merit, then he can act in accordance with his plans. This is probably due to her achievements. The people of Turin could not ignore their importance. It does not matter whether he is given the title of prince or not, all his achievements are attributed to the family. His Majesty intends to invite him tomorrow, so he should rest and prepare for the upcoming feast. The next meeting will take place in the royal palace. Those present thought the activities were wonderful. Jackson asked Alice to stop putting food on him. It seemed to him that everyone was watching them. He felt the attention of others and wanted to maintain some delicacy at this moment. They look because she is a marquise, in front of him she is just his wife, and this, naturally, serves as a reminder to him of differences in social status. The crown prince wondered what this guy was capable of, which is why Alice addressed him this way. The fourth prince noted that he probably simply did not interact with Jackson and called him a wonderful person. He took note of his words carefully, paying attention to the opinions expressed and maintaining a neutral position. At that moment, the prince turned around and looked at James. And James, in turn, simply remained silent and continued to look at him. The emperor told Alice to sit with him and drink a little. Of course, she agreed to his proposal. What was expected of the victorious marquise, emphasizing the prominent role and responsibility associated with her victory. She has the opportunity to sit next to the emperor. Jackson didn't react to this and just continued drinking his drink. The emperor asked if she would be angry because he made her sit apart from her husband. After returning, he heard that Alice had found herself a husband, and he wondered who she loved. But when the emperor asked if she would be offended for sharing a place with her husband, she simply sat next to him and drank, and Jackson, remaining indifferent, continued to drink his drink. She is confident in this person and will never leave him. The crown prince was about to say something to Jackson. He would like to drink to the fact that Jackson opened his eyes to her wonderful creation. Jackson didn't react, just looked at him. The man raised a toast to Jackson, expressing his respect and favor for him. Still, the main character thanked him. He was interested to know where Mr. Jackson got the divine items sold at the auction house the other day. Of course, he immediately began to get nervous. The fourth prince said that this was a bit of a harsh question. After all, divine items are the basis of Mr. Jackson, so how can he reveal their origins? He asked if his brother remembered him. Of course, he remembered everything, because he has a good memory. The Minister of War and the Minister of Home Affairs immediately began to understand their activities. Jackson couldn't understand what all the fuss was about the holiday dinner, and James continued to watch all this closely. Those present believed that Jackson was truly mysterious. Alice could hardly contain herself as she heard these conversations, expressing her displeasure regarding the topics discussed. Still, her nerves could not stand it, and she decided to speak out about it. She said that today she would have to be impolite in front of the emperor, having previously warned about possible manifestations of her displeasure. But it didn't matter to him, because it was her holiday. Alice thanked him, expressing her gratitude for his attention or support. After that, I decided to look at the men who were spreading various rumors. She said that if they needed an explanation, she would give it to them. Her husband has lost his memory and does not remember where he comes from. He only remembers how he makes some objects, and they call these objects divine. Jackson accepted his wife's explanations with slight surprise. Of course, the man believed that this was just a lie. Any lie before His Majesty is a crime. She asked if she was being accused of deceiving the emperor. The man couldn't resist her and said he didn't say that. She also could not understand how she dare not interrogate her husband on her own holiday. The emperor said that he trusts Alice, and he also trusts the minister. No more discussion. Finally, they told him that he was very wise. He sees Jackson's love in Alice's eyes. Today he personally gives permission for the marriage, and the wedding will be arranged according to the imperial family. The highest official was afraid of something, hinting at an unknown danger. But the emperor told them that there should be no objections. They were surprised that His Majesty showed such kindness to their family. On the streets of the capital, where the noise of celebration could still be felt, everyone was carefully awaiting the return of Alice Jackson. The commander assigned him to look after the carriage, confident that the crew would carry out their duties in strict accordance with the instructions received. Recently, at a holiday party, she released herself from all the pressure, realizing that he had no reciprocal feelings. Having missed more than once, she will still always believe him. He saved her life, helped collect winter clothes for the Northern Army, revived shops, and took care of wounded disabled people. She remembers all these actions, but it doesn't matter to her who came from where. The act of kindness in care itself is important. so at that moment I wanted to tell her something. But suddenly the news of an enemy attack was conveyed to her, and her heart sank, a sudden chill entering her insides. Fortunately, the fox reacted instantly, deftly intercepting the arrow right in front of its face. Realizing that she was likely being followed, he asked Jackson to stay in Korea, deciding to meet them himself to protect his friend. The strangers were convinced that their meeting today would end Alice's life. Realizing that danger lurks not only for her, but also for Jackson, she begged to protect him by any means necessary. Then the first of the strangers immediately attacked her, darkness embodied in their collision. Without a moment's hesitation, she hurled his own arrow at him, an answer to his challenge, and in that gesture was contained not only self-defense, but also determination to confront the threat that had found her. He said that even if she is in a holy place, she still does not underestimate him. Deciding that the time had come to defend himself, the man resorted to his sword. To his amazement, the sword seemed to simply fall apart, reality refusing to obey normal laws. And suddenly the arrow, as if penetrating through another reality, passed through him. The man's body became an invisible barrier, and the moment was filled with a strange feeling of the impossible. His ally found it difficult to accept what was happening, reality blurred before his eyes, and he witnessed events that were beyond his understanding. Alice took advantage of the chaos and began to attack. Of course, he died instantly on the spot. Alice could not understand what a joke it was that they were deciding to kill her. As expected from one of the top 3 martial artists, the commander ordered everyone to retreat so he could take on the Marquis himself. Returning after the victory, Alice was waylaid by an ambush in which this man participated. She was saved by the fact that he was unable to carry out the planned murder. The commander noted that what was happening seemed very strange, but this time he was confident that he could kill her, showing determination and toughness that foreshadowed a new, greater threat. He then began to attack, swinging his huge sword. He was determined to kill her personally, and his eyes gleamed with deadly determination and dark sinisterness. He himself became the personification of danger. Alice had excellent reflexes and easily dodged his attack. The commander turned out to be no less powerful than the Marquis, and in this clash of two powerful forces tension began to sound. Turning to the Marquis, the servant attracted his attention. It turned out that he threw her dragon halberd at her. Deftly picking up his favorite weapon, he prepared for a new stage of the conflict. Now the commander had less and less chance of victory. She reminded him of his own words, in which he said that she was able to escape. In addition, she stated that it was all just a dream, and, having dealt with this, he suddenly began to simply run away from her. To prevent anyone from trying to escape her, she raised her dragon halberd. One of the strangers noted that there are clearly not enough of them here. The guy warned him not to underestimate him, and these words sounded confident. None of them would get through. It was clear from his determination that he would not let them capture the Marquis. With a high level of cultivation, he took on the role of a guardian, ready to ward off any threat. The first thing they did was not target the Marchioness, but Jackson. This was also okay. The guy asked not to blame him, explaining that Jackson was not considered worthy enough to be a Marquis, and he decided to get rid of him. Just at this time a large and healthy guy appeared. At this time, Alice was pursuing the commander. She became a shadow, ready to loom over him and fight back in response to his sinister intentions. Fortunately, she was able to catch up with him and was ready to strike back. At that moment all her fears and hopes came true. The commander desperately tried to protect himself from her. Alice possessed enormous strength, and if he made a mistake, it would seem that his bones would simply break under the pressure of her powerful blow. She couldn't understand what else he was hiding. Of course, the commander was not particularly talkative, so he did not waste time on useless conversations. Their battle went down in history as one of the most epic and legendary. Each of their blows became part of the eternal narrative. His blows always fought with opponents, but for some reason it didn't work on her. Her strength was something unique and did not lend itself to the usual rules of collisions. He had the illusion that he could defeat her because they both belonged to the same martial saint realm, but in front of her unique strength, even this similarity did not guarantee him success. Without giving up on his plan to be a winner, he continued to fight. He was supposed to be the commander of the enemy troops, the military leader and the king of the sword. The commander didn't even know what to say to her in response to this. Then, using her energy, she finally dropped the stranger's mask. The commander was unable to continue the battle, his strength exhausted before the unexpected disclosure. The true face of the stranger was revealed to us. The veil of secrecy was lifted. Alice asked him to consider whether he had the courage to fight her to the death. She truly lived up to her title, her every move and attack highlighting the outstanding skill and strength inherent in a true combat expert. He asked if she really thought they were still aimed at him this time, and suddenly it dawned on her that they were targeting Jackson. The fourth prince was told that an assassination attempt had been made on Jackson, and nothing was known about his life yet. The fourth prince immediately began to wonder who could have initiated this assassination attempt, and he was faced with the task of unraveling the mysterious conspiracy. The servant began to confess to Alice, ready to reveal the secrets of the story surrounding the assassination attempt on Jackson. He failed to protect Jackson and was kidnapped. Just at that moment, Jackson woke up, but already in his own world, the events of his own reality began to intertwine with the plot of his dream. Seeing his laptop in front of him, he realized that he was in his own world. Of course, he was scared to death, because he never imagined that he would be able to recover from such an experience. Just at this time Alexander came in and asked if he had returned yet. He caught him at the moment when the guy was changing clothes. Jackson didn't even know how to react to this situation. Alexander, in fact, was also simply silent, wondering what to do best at this moment. Alexander asked him to check how much money was on this card. Only when he drove and looked at the card and saw the amount did he believe that this was not a dream. As long as there are enough goods, the rate of accumulation of wealth will exceed all his expectations. The main character noticed that someone was calling him. Oddly enough, the caller turned out to be Grace. She immediately started complaining to him about dinner, and when her mom heard what she was saying to Jackson, she was furious. Jackson was easily lost in thought at this moment, and an unexpected pause appeared in front of him. Alexander, as always, did not betray a single emotion in her. His indifference remained an impenetrable shield against external manifestations of feelings. The girl said that they couldn't talk later because she was busy right now. Jackson said that he also wants to spend all his time with her and that they will still have the opportunity to communicate. His words sounded hopeful for the future. He was ready to do anything for his sister. There was no way to be exposed to dangerous situations like the ones that happened today again. Alexander wanted to ask Jackson something. He couldn't understand what was happening to his vision. Of course, the main character could not understand what he was talking about, because he still saw perfectly. But he forgot that he still sees perfectly well without glasses. He thought that this was due to the increase in cultivation level, and never imagined that his eyesight could improve. If he were an ordinary person, he would probably die today, and now he wondered how Alice was living now. At that moment, Elizabeth appeared to them, who said that she had finally found the two of them. She couldn't understand why both weren't answering their calls. Alexander said that both of them have their cell phones on silent mode. He heard that Grace was going to the party. Not only did he want to say this, but in this brief remark there was a hint that he had more to tell or express. She asked Jackson if he knew that Grace was engaged to Michael. He couldn't believe the girl's words. When the mother and daughter entered, everyone admired their beauty, and their presence awakened the general admiration of those around them. The mother turned to her daughter, her words sounded attention and care for her loved one, and the girl, in turn, rudely asked what she wanted. Irritation sounded in her tone. This situation brought her great discomfort. She felt awkward and uncomfortable in this context. She couldn't understand why she shouldn't go out that way. Mom explained that this was all due to the fact that she was the queen of the party. This role brought certain responsibilities and restrictions on her daughter's behavior. Just at that moment Michael turned to her. He said that he had been waiting for her for a very long time. His words carried anticipation and impatience. As it turned out, it was an engagement party. The mother said that she organized this for the sake of her daughter. Her actions were aimed at creating joy and happiness for her loved ones. It is unclear why the woman's facial expression suddenly changed. Grace looked at her mother very thoughtfully and mysteriously. She then asked if her mother thought she was submissive to her. The opinions of others are important to her. She just pretends that they are together. She invited only nobles and their children. Michael said that he could do it. Of course he knows that she simply cannot be convinced. At this time, 3 friends were rushing to this party. Alexander noted that Jackson ran faster, otherwise they would not make it in time. It's not so easy to conquer, but if you try, it's possible. Just at that moment, the holiday security came to them. Alexander realized that this would be a very big obstacle for them. They need to get Grace out of the party quickly. Of course, the girl was not happy with all these actions. Her mood reflected dissatisfaction and disappointment. Michael knows that she will not fail and will not break her promises to everyone. She is afraid that her position in society and among these people will change because of Jackson, but he can help her. He grabbed her by the hair and said that she was the heiress of the company. Michael decided to tell him what he saw. They would get married, they would have a child. She would transfer shares of the company to this child, and he would allow her to live with Jackson for the rest of her life. At this moment, the girl faced a very difficult choice. But the guards, of course, intended to throw their friends away from the holiday. Alexander realized that he needed to make a decision. He decided that they would go first and he would hold up the guards. Elizabeth decided that she would help the guy. she decided that it was better to hit him because he wouldn't just agree. She decided to hit him, knowing that this would not solve the problem and the best thing to do was to run away with Jackson. Jackson tried to console them. In response, they both simultaneously ordered him to shut up and not interfere in their affairs. It was at that moment that the attack on Alexander began. He was forced to react instantly, otherwise he was in danger of being hit right in the face. Luckily, Jackson responded instantly. Alexander was left in shock, unaware of his friend's such abilities. Elizabeth was also surprised, because she did not expect this from someone whom she considered weak in her eyes. The guy said that he would deal with this later, and now the main thing is to deliver him to his sister. Let the girl think that Michael is giving her a helping hand, because they mutually support each other. All her efforts were directed solely for the sake of Jackson. Michael said that he was a little shy and because of this there was a slight delay. The engagement party is declared open. And just at that moment Jackson appeared to them. Of course, everyone present was surprised at such a bright appearance. The main character immediately apologized for being late. Alexander was still in shock from what Jackson did. In addition, Elizabeth did not know that Jackson was a martial arts practitioner. Of course, Alexander didn't know this either and he was just as interested as the girls. Alexander said that they did not have time for this and they needed to run. Michael was shocked by how Jackson was able to do this, and now the legendary battle between the Grace family was ahead of them.